Okay, we are live for Infinite Plane Saturnday for October the 5th, 2025. Setting up the chats right now. So we're going to be live on a couple of YouTube channels and also on X. So if you're on X, just comment and we will respond to your comments as usual. And you can also just join us on YouTube. And if you comment at all, you will get a titanium blue wrench. I mean, obviously, it's just a digital wrench, but the one that will be dropped off at your porch will be titanium. So today's topics, I know everyone has Charlie Kirk fatigue, but, we're doing our due diligence here. And there were people who are on the fence. Is he alive? Is he dead? And to me, this is the new litmus test. If you remember the original form of this think tank, we had it set up so that people wouldn't be allowed in to have a wrench, to have mod status, to participate, because we had an auto ban. If you didn't have a wrench, you got kicked. We had zero tolerance for any kind of trolling or people who didn't have enough of an understanding of our perspective to constructively contribute to what we have been doing. So we had to ban them automatically. And some people took it the wrong way, which we took as a good sign that they shouldn't be part of the group if they're that fragile. But we amassed a group of individuals who all passed the litmus test. And what was the litmus test? How many people died at fill in the blank? And what do you think about the shape of the world as presented by NASA? And the answers would kind of tell us, well, is this person objective and skeptical enough to veer away from the mainstream and look for more information? Is this person reflexively going with the mainstream as true unless it's been debunked for me first? And this format is something that I want to carry forward. And the reason why we bring up these two areas is we have to talk about how the fakery on the ground and the fakery up above are part of the same system. There are people who, this is why I don't really care about the opinions of these professional anti-flat earth debaters, because they believe the news is real. And this is really about worldview anyway. It's not really a shape thing. That was always, I think, a misdirection from the more central pressing question. Jamarian May says, the most dangerous people on the planet are auto believers. Yeah, that's actually a quote from my McMedia interview. And I actually think it's true. We're talking about the people who reflexively believe everything to be real. Yeah, those are the ones that are going to be setting cars on fire, rioting in the streets, who will be acting at the behest of the media puppet masters. And it's always been this way. What we advocate here is inactivism. Because if you're an activist on the anti or the pro position, which are both controlled, you are the controlled opposition, which is an important phrase because people think controlled opposition are these clandestine, hidden individuals creeping around trying to influence you. And maybe you can point out some obvious controlled op agents, like Nick Fuentes calls Candace Owens controlled op. And, it's like feds calling feds, like that meme where it's got 5 different individuals in Spider-Man costumes. And they're all pointing at each other, calling each other Fed. Well, that's what it looks like. But the reason it does is because the controlled opposition, the term, it's thrown around too loosely. But if you think about it, the truther movement is the opposition to the mainstream, which they presume is controlled. So the controlled opposition term can be applied to the opposite side if you assume that they're not authentic, that they're being puppeteered. Well, now that we know alternative media is just as controlled as the mainstream, the question of who is controlled opposition has been answered. Everybody who takes part in it, not just the propaganda vectors, the big platforms, the big mouths, but also just the regular commenters who just believe this stuff. If you're in that media ecosystem as a true believer, you are the controlled opposition. To what? Well, to objective reality, to yourself, and to your basically controlled opposition to the people who have figured out how this thing works, how this Truman Show has been established in our minds, and how we have taken a perspective or a point of view that puts us outside of it. So, in other words, your opposition is directed not towards the system you think you're fighting, but towards those who have a legitimate perspective on it. So you've been conscripted into the Psy war. And you can't say you're anti-war if you're participating in the psychological warfare, even if you think you're on the good guy side. All these anti-war people are actually pro-war, because the war is essentially what? It's information war. Thank you, Reality Witness. He throws in $5 for the auto hoax revolution. Yeah, today is Saturnday. A Saturday has always been open topics review the rest of the week. And the reason I put that there is we have to keep in mind that beneath even the most mundane things is the ubiquitous trappings of a cult that runs this place that seems to be largely based in some kind of pagan perspective of the world, where, and this explains a lot of the symbolism that we talk about. So yeah, Sunday, sun, moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, those are the days of the week. So it's just something we like to kind of point out here, especially if you look at the significance of Saturn as it comes to the idea of the ruler of this place, the ruler of time and space. And that archetype is pretty much baked in to all of the predictive programming. The other night, we talked about the design authority and the strangers, the design authority from Megalopolis and the strangers from Dark City, as being representative of this Saturnian presence and this governance over time and space itself. Deprogrammed Truther says most are blissfully ignorant. Yeah, don't wake the dreamers. Let them have their peace of mind to the extent that they can ignore the bad stuff. It's not true peace, but it's more peaceful than the awoke, the awakened, the red pill, or the wokesters. Those groups of people are actually having nightmares. They're not really awake. They didn't awaken from the dream. They went deeper into it. Oh, today's Sunday? My bad. You know what it is? I made a bunch of little posters to advertise for the thumbnail, and I didn't get to use the one yesterday. Okay, so I'm the one I missed today. So what are we going to do? Infinite Planes Sunday. I'll just have to update the thumbnail. Hopefully no one's that confused, but thanks for pointing it out. I spent the day yesterday painting. In fact, somebody had inquired about this painting of the girl in the subway getting stabbed. If you want that one, email me at timosman007 and I'll send it to you. Jamarin May says, the masses find great joy by outsourcing their cognition to authority. It's a matter of training. I think people have been trained to have a bit of faith in media, trust in media. And so getting back to this main topic today, one of the points that we've been bringing up is the litmus test. Like, is it okay to follow so-called investigators, researchers, independent journalists if they think that CK was actually taken out? If they believe he's dead, what does that say about their discernment? What does it say about their understanding of media? It means that their operating system is outmoded. They haven't figured it out. And we need to stop, I'm not saying stop associating with, but I think we need to stop treating them as thought leaders. You certainly should not be supporting any such channels. I'm talking about your time, your attention, your most valuable resource. Why would you direct it at someone who hasn't figured it out? And I'm specifically talking about the bloody guardrail. Because there are a lot of people out there in this field who know about psychological operations, they know about hoaxes, but they still think people die in psyops. And we're naming names. Now it's time to name names. Now it's time. The raft has reached the shores of the world stage. Now it's time that we start imposing our standards. MSM minus collides with MSM plus. And it's really about, I think, establishing here that we've already moved past a lot of these false explanations. These rabbit trails are well paved. They've been paved for you. That should tell you something. Yeah, commenter says, losing track of what day it is a good sign of being outside of the cube. It happens more than I'd like to admit. Like, I actually ask frequently, what day is it? Because I live every single day the exact same way. I'm a total creature of habit. I wake up, my routine kicks off. I usually wake up and I immediately start writing, but I have this routine and it never changes. I don't acknowledge weekends. I don't take weekends off. So it's really easy for me to not know what day it is. I can just tell by the way people drive. Like when I see psychopathic teenagers at night with their headlights off, speeding around, I hear loud engines. I can kind of ascertain what day it is. Tomanoid says I thought it was Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday would be Mercury, Wotan, Odin, and then Friday, Frida, Venus. Okay, so to continue about this idea of this litmus test. So naming names. Okay, obviously Candace Owens. She's in the game. She knows. Don't expect them to ever change on this. They will never go past the bloody guardrail. So guardrails are the narrative structures put in place to prevent you from something as fake, but rather it gives you an alternative explanation that does not disrupt the integrity of the mainstream story. So whether you're mainstream or alternative, as long as you accept that blood was spilled, you're not going to talk about it being fake. Squibs won't be discussed. I mean, there may be blood on that guardrail, but it's theatrical blood. So what we're looking at here is a deliberate effort to prevent people from figuring out what media actually is, how it's essentially is a branch of government. Coyote Smoke and Mirror says there's a new video surface that makes it obvious it was a squib exploding under Kirk's t-shirt. Yeah, that explains a lot of it. You heard the original explanations. It was a shock wave or it was a bullet from behind. They're up to like second shooter number 40 by now. Like they're just going through every possible angle and saying it was this person, it was that person. But all of these conspiracy theories are put there in place for a reason. They're repeating what they did after JFK. They want to make it look like anyone who doesn't trust mainstream is somehow unhinged. So the term conspiracy is a pejorative. Which we're not conspiracy theorists here. Not at all. In fact, I've debunked most of the conspiracy theories that keep people in Trutherville. And if you're still behind the guardrail, you're in Trutherville. You haven't left. And some may say, well, I don't know for sure. Okay, well, if you're saying at this stage, specifically with the Charlie Kirk event, and we haven't even gone through the new stuff regarding Erica Kirk and the weird connections to Snake Eyes and everything else. If you're still ambiguous about this particular event, despite all the hoax indicators that continue to pile up, then you're expressing a view that would suggest that the mainstream media is not falsifiable. No evidence at all will convince you to be certain that they're lying. And if that's where you are, then you're a believer. You're not a skeptic. You're not a informed disbeliever, but you've actually become a believer by default, which is a very mainstream point of view. And I understand some people want to have a mainstream point of view so they can still fit in. And I'm just here to say that you can. I talk to mainstream minds like a mainstreamer. I know how to talk to a conspiracy theorist, but I don't make the mistake of thinking that my point of view is going to translate to theirs. Just like I don't go to ChatGPT and ask if Charlie Kirk really got shot or if he was squibbed, thinking it's going to tell me the truth. No, it's going to reflect the mainstream agenda at all times. Dark Ghost Wind says people will come up with the strangest reasons to justify it being real. When you get to the point of talking about 2D invisible shooters, you should question your perspective. Yeah. As soon as I saw them talking about a shooter coming out from under the sewer, or the new one, some kind of a plant in his neck, which is like newsbenders, and that they exploded the planted explosive in his neck. Ozark Logistics says, hey, Infinite Plane, do you stream on TalkStream Live anymore? I think they are reruns. I have not been updating them, but since you mentioned it, I will start. In fact, I'll begin today. We have a 3-hour live stream we did a couple days ago. I'll make that the first one. So let me put that in my notes. I will update the audio streams. And I'm going to add other content to it as well, like the Zoom conferences and our Discord chats. I have Discord on top. So if you look on the screen, if you want to get into Discord, join the newsletter. And I'm going to send out a new notification today. If you want to get into Discord, because we do have a lot of researchers 24/7 who are talking about these things and really anything. Dark Ghost Wind says, this is probably non-related, but Japan is receiving a new hyper-nationalist female prime minister that lines up with the woman in The Tempest. And Tempest was the #1 movie in Japan when it came out. So let's get into this next thing. So it turns out that Erica Kirk commented on a video 13 years ago. The video, Emerson Drive, My Kind of Crazy. It's a terrible country music song. I'm not a critic, and I think they all are. But in it, she's ziplining past the numbers 1010 and then 910. And 910 is above Fremont, which some have associated with freedom on his shirt. But anyway, Fremont. In the comments, she says to the director, and I can pull it up here, but just paraphrasing, she said, Tyler and I had a blast shooting the video. So like Tyler, shooting, blast, 910. So you connect these dots and you're like, okay, well, that's a little peculiar. And this led some people to think it's some kind of witchcraft. Well, it turns out, and Jurassic Liars figured this out, I think he figured out during a live stream. You can go back and there's a way you can find out the times that the comments on YouTube happen to be posted. And she happened to have made that comment 13 years ago on September the 10th. So in addition to the 910 that she zip-tied past, flying like a witch, someone said, this Jezebel witch archetype thing, she actually commented on September the 10th, 13 years to the day. And then in that comment referenced a guy named Tyler and a shoot and a blast. So you put this together, what are you looking at? It's not simulation. It's something else. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we've been talking about The Tempest, and The Tempest was released on September the 10th, 2025, and features the leader of the New Republicans getting shot on the left side of his neck, exactly where Kirk was shot. And this is in a church in the show. So Kirk means church. So not only did her comment sort of foreshadow Kirk's assassination, but also this Hulu Tempest thing. The show follows with the widow who takes over the New Republicans just as, at the same time, on the world stage, as Erica Kirk took over TPUSA. And she was called the Storm at the Memorial, which is like a Tempest reference. And then she's coached to give a speech where she shows vulnerability and gets people to cry because that's how you're going to win over the constituency of her dead husband. So the widow takes over. Same thing that happened with Erica Kirk. Well, then the Snake Eyes thing comes up. And the Snake Eyes thing has been given mainstream attention, even though no one's talking about the Tempest. Tim, Ted Stryker says, did I see you call Erica Kirk the other day? Yeah, I did, actually. I address all these stagers directly, just as a matter of record, knowing they will not respond. But so they know that we know. And they know we know. And there's nothing she can do about that comment. And it is a major hoax indicator. I mean, it's proof of for planning, foreknowledge, but it goes, a lot of people get lost when they think that he's dead. Because they're like, oh, they planned his death this long in advance? Is this some kind of satanic sacrifice? And that's where you get these kind of oddball theories, but it's because their presupposition is built on he died. And that's the bloody guardrail that prevents people from understanding how these things work. And we'll get to it because we do know what they're doing. So Snake Eyes has this character, and this is where the new blog post explains it. And I'll pull this up in case you haven't seen it. Erica Kirk's Snake Eyes connections. So it should be enough to say something's up, that she made a comment 13 years to the day referencing the name of the shooter and a shooting and a blast with the already existing references The video is 3 minutes and 22 seconds, which some connect with Skull and Bones, which may have some significance if you look at the King Kill 33 article that goes into the occult symbolism around the JFK assassination. But now listen to this. In the 2025 Heads of State, and this movie's out right now. So this, kind of like the Tempest movie, and again, Storm, Tempest, and Snake Eyes, takes place during a hurricane, Jezebel. So in the 2025 movie Heads of State, Vice President Elizabeth Kirk of the United States is played by Carla Gugino. So there's a movie out right now about a Vice President Kirk. And this caught my attention because there were people who were making this ridiculous claim, possibly, or this wishful thinking. They were suggesting that maybe Erica Kirk should be vice president underneath J.D. Vance. So post-Trump, they think she could be vice president material. So it's kind of interesting. I'm like, wait a minute here. At this exact time, and as the commenter said, the female prime minister, that's probably part of this, because this is ubiquitous. This predictive programming stuff is saturating the global media environment when it comes to these big events. I mean, Charlie Kirk was there in South Korea at the site of Tempest, addressing the same group that the corresponding fictional character was addressing. I mean, this is the merge of real and fake. This is hyper reality here. But I thought, okay, Erica Kirk is being discussed, and there's memes all about this. Erica Kirk will VP the J.D. Vance ticket. So I thought, okay, so there's already this movie out right now about a Vice President Kirk. Elizabeth Kirk, but it's still an E. Kirk. But consider that Snake Eyes is about a Charlie Kirkland getting shot in the neck. So this is typical of what we would expect, just a minor change, but it's pretty much the same. But what gets interesting here is that this actress who plays Vice President Elizabeth Kirk is the same actress who plays the blonde woman in Snake Eyes, who's sitting next to and is involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirkland. So if you get this, you got VP Kirk, and then you have Charlie Kirkland, same actress in both these movies. So this is connecting both predictive programming and concurrent programming from 1998 to 2025. You throw in The Tempest, concurrent programming. You throw in Emerson Drive's video, country music video from 12 years ago. Well, now you have The Tempest, you have Heads of State, Snake Eyes, and a music video, all corresponding directly to a simulated assassination. So how does this all make sense? Well, we'll get to that. I actually put a line in here at the end that I think we should just jump to first, because I've already reviewed most of the things here. First of all, and this is the main point, the PSYOP script would necessarily precede and then inform the predictive programming. The script existed before this guy ever entered the world stage in politics. Hey, thank you, Ashy Dog, for feeding the Kraken, which is the raft. When it reaches a certain size, becomes a kraken. Kevin Mooring says the stadium is a coiled snake. In the movie? Okay, so to continue here, let me just get through this. The Snake Eyes Heads of State connection to the Kirk saga revealed integrated script connecting decades of contiguous psychological operations. The entertainment industry has always paralleled the PSYOPs. That's why I brought up John Frankenheimer and his association with JFK and RFK. Again, the entertainment industry has always paralleled the PSYOPs. It's not difficult to understand when you recognize that there's long-term planning for events that will be grafted onto our timeline, into our shared history. The relationship between these movies, the Hulu series, the music videos, and the assassination event itself exemplifies how the entertainment merges real with fake, synchronizing pre-planned, synchronized entertainment with pre-planned fake events. So just to emphasize that they're not predicting real things. Charlie would have known when he signed up for the role, when he picked, that he was going to be JFK'd. that this would be the new JFK. And I'm not the only one saying this. It was actually being said the day it happened. While it was happening, it was being discussed. JFK was, in a very concerted way, force memed into this whole situation. But what this does is it exemplifies how entertainment helps to add what I call reinforcement content for the psyops. And these events are like pages in our history book. So if you go back to every one of these significant events, like the Oklahoma City bombing, Waco, 9/11, just look at these events as significant plot twists or plot points where the world stage changes as a result. These are the fake events that steer the news cycles that might otherwise contain mostly real news. So again, not all news is fake, but all psyops that we see, all these events that we look at are basically like unavoidable. They're forced into the minds of everybody, whether you're watching the news, you're watching movies, playing video games, or comic books. It's impossible to avoid these things. But these are all constructs, simulations. Thomas Fries says, space is fake AI. Thanks, Tim, for all you do. Whatever you think about the shape of the world, there are too many hoax indicators around NASA to accept the world as presented by NASA, unless you're willing to swallow a lot of bad Photoshop and bad special effects and bad acting. Brought to you by the same PSYOP entertainment plex that brought you the Charlie Kirk squibbing. To me, it's not logically consistent that someone like Jared would say that Kate Perry really went to space. Like, I can understand. I went to Antarctica, I saw the sun for 24 hours, the Earth's a ball. But Kate Perry going to space, that's a huge leap, because the only evidence you would have for that is what they show you on the screen. And if you look at what they showed us, it was a bunch of jump cuts. You didn't really see any floating. The hair wasn't acting appropriately. Maybe they didn't have hairspray on the set, but the hair wasn't sticking up like you would expect. And I think one of the big tells was as Kate Perry went up, her face didn't melt. The G-forces didn't hit them. Ryler05 says, the screen is now the church. Yeah, I would argue the same, that media has supplanted religion. Just expand your definition of what religion is. But it's like a template. They've essentially, it's syncretism. They've merged religion with science fiction, with the movies, with psyops on our news to put us into this highly suggestible state. And they have carte blanche when it comes to writing history. And this isn't like they decided to run this psyop last year. The predictive programming is evidence that the assassination was planned before the movie could have come out. You have to look at these movies as propaganda vectors. And Brian De Palma would be considered a metascriptor. By the way, he was born on 9/11. Andrea says the stadium was called State Farm Stadium, and it's home of NFL's Arizona Cardinals. There have been questions asked about when did they rent the stadium, for the morning, for the 99,999 people crying, while Erica Kirk smiled. Lynn Erto, who's a frequent guest, or she has a show now, I think, on Fakeologist, but we talk quite a bit. And I went on Facebook and I saw a comment from her that I thought was worth repeating here, because this is something I've been getting into. The idea that we shouldn't have to rely solely on the visual deconstructions. We shouldn't have to rely on errors on their part for us to know it's fake. Because there's going to be a point where they're not going to mistake. AI is going to replace the crisis actors. They might invent like squibs for tears, since they can't cry on cue, something where they can deploy it and then the tears squirt out. Ryler05 says, Atari 2600 released on 9/11/77. The logo mimics Dealey Plaza and the World Trade Center. Atari means to hit the target. Yeah, it's pretty safe to say. I think it's pretty self-evident. This is just what the research bears out. that the destruction of the Twin Towers, this event, this world-changing event, was built into, it was actually written into the script before they even built the towers. The earliest example of 9/11 predictive programming, I would probably say, is the groundbreaking ceremony for the Pentagon, 60 years to the day from 9/11, 1941. Although, if you look at the coincidence between the JFK assassination and the Lincoln one, and all these significant events in their lives that took place exactly 100 years apart, and all these coincidences tell you that they've been scripting, writing, manufacturing our history since that at least the Lincoln assassination, which we can presume was as fake as this. I don't think they had squibs back then, but John Wilkes Booth an actor? Andrea says, I bought the New York Times on Friday and it had the photo of Erica and Trump with her doing the devil sign. Yeah, people will say it's I love you. No, it's not. And if you, and I mean, I guess it could be, sure, but you have to know who they're communicating to and how it's looked at online, and just the optics of it, given, the whole QAnon, the deep state, Pizzagate, you'd think they'd be a little more sensitive to hand signs. So when she threw up the horns, and you know who else did that? Walking up the steps to his squibbing, Charlie Kirk. He did that with his left hand. Now, let me read what Lynn wrote, because this is about the visual deconstruction. She said, it's very interesting to me that many people are less preoccupied with the original videos and forensic analysis of the event itself, but they're seeing through the fakery based mainly on the poorly performed roles of post-event actors. And she has a picture of Erica Kirk with the Kleenex on her eye. I predict this will become the dominant trend in the public's response to these psyops. Now, I kind of disagree. It is the intelligent way to go. That is the way we do it now. I've been emphasizing this, but I don't see this being adopted. So I refer to these as hoax indicators. But this is our standard, and this is what we need to implement. This is what we need to enforce. And what I mean by this is when someone says the shooting looked real, so it was real. Well, I'd say, well, before you can claim to know it's real, because that's not enough information, you have to deal with all of the other questions raised first. And if they're not valid questions, you can refute them. Like, maybe it's not a big deal that there were no ambulances, no crime scene tape, no police, that the crime scene was tampered with. Maybe that's not a big deal. But I want to hear the explanation for why it's not. And these would be deviations from protocol. And the more of those, the more likely the thing is staged. Rylo05 says, Star Wars was released in 1977. The movie is about hitting a target and destroying the Death Stars. George Floyd died on the 43rd anniversary of the Star Wars release date. I'd have to see that mind mapped out. Mind maps are very useful when you're trying to look at related events that are separated by many years. Like, one of the more fascinating parallels that I saw was the repeat. Like, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But we do actually get times where it seems to repeat. Like, you had 7/13, Trump's shooting day. 7/13, 1977 was the blackouts in Manhattan on 42nd Street on. And then exactly 42 years to the day, we're talking in 2019, 7/13, blackouts hit the exact same area. And this was noted. It said blackouts repeat. But the thing that we were picking up on was the frequency of the number 42 in these stories. And with the more recent one, they even said 42,000 people were put to the dark. They were very specific. But the significance of it was that the number 42, and this is, again, something that when you map it out, you kind of see these patterns, has been consistently used in psyops to represent blackouts, darkness. 42 is a number that I've consistently seen associated with the idea of Saturn and, again, darkness. So there's this repeated theme. And that number shows up disproportionately among various psychological operations involving civil rights, weirdly enough. And same goes for 33. These are things that we're not saying we know what they mean. And another point I've been trying to raise in our chats here is that we have to separate direct hits as far as release dates, corresponding scenes to fake events from the secondary connections and tertiary connections. We only can rely on the initial ones, although you can look at psychological operations as sort of an art because it's theater. And there may be inferred meanings. There may be other symbolic meanings, mythical things, archetypal symbolism attached to these events, but that may not be primary evidence of foreknowledge or scripting, and that's kind of what our focus has been. BLM was started on July 13th. I did not know that. So July 13th was the date, I called it the blackout date. And it's interesting that that was the date that Trump got his ear pierced in Butler. And it has a lot of other fascinating associations I've mapped out, all tying into 113 and the destruction of Seattle that's been, you could say, prophesied. I mean, what are you going to call it? It's not real prophecy because they're not real events. And this is another key point. They're not telling us the bad things they're going to do in the future. That's been a misdirection that people have kind of thought that these events are being telegraphed by the bad guys before they do them. And I'm saying, well, no, the bad guys aren't that bad. Maybe their acting is bad. Maybe the directors are sorely looking. They don't have Hollywood level talent, but they're not really doing the bad things. They're faking things. Big Enchilada says black matter lives. Well, yeah, black matter, Saturn, the number 42, these things are so intricately connected in the role of symbolism. Well, what I think it relates to is this central bifurcation on the world stage, the political horseshoe. And we talk about the Masonic stuff they throw over these events. Well, you've got the two pillars, the black and the white pillar. And so the race stuff isn't really about race. I think the race stuff is really about the intentionally inflicted schisms, polarization, and the perpetual war this creates. So the number 42 is consistently associated with the civil rights, black civil rights heroes. It's a reoccurring theme. Like Rosa Parks was 42, for example. But you'll see conspicuous uses of that number with these events. And similarly, the number 33 happens to have this like parallel use that I think is associated with the other pillar, the light. So 33 is consistently associated with ascension, the sun, a big one, the sun, the whole Christ thing, the Burning Man, but it's like transcendence, ascension versus descent and falling. Elon Musk has made a great deal of the number 42. He's just put it on everything. Even he had 33 engines on the 33 of these Raptor engines. Then they added 9 more to make it 42. But he puts 42 on everything. I think they're trying to put 42,000 satellites, Starlink satellites, into orbit. But the 42, according to him, actually comes from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which all ties into deep thought, the AI computer God thing at the center of the universe that tells them that the meaning of life is 42. Like, what does that mean? Some say 42 is computer programming language, references the asterisk, which is like the wild, the random variable. But whatever it is, he says the number 42 pertains to this science fiction. But I would say that the 42 has more to do with Saturn, as we started this conversation talking about Saturn. And interestingly, and this is why I don't think Musk being honest, because he's not the only one that uses it. Jeff Bezos installed a massive clock inside of the mountains in Texas, the Sierra Diablo Mountains, Devil Mountains. And this clock costed him $42 million. So $42 million on a clock. Well, what is a clock? A clock is a symbol, it's an altar to Kronos, Saturn, time. Again, just this reoccurring theme of Saturn worship, Saturn V rocket that NASA took us to the moon. This rocket is really, if you ask me, a reiteration of it's a new iteration of the obelisk, the symbol of their Earth god, which again you could correspond with Saturn. And again, the Earth, matter, the number 42, these things are grouped together. And I don't care to get too much into their symbolism, but we're just noticing what's there. Coolness says, I love God and need some inspiration on how a 40-year-old train wreck could find a job during a pandemic. Any proverbs for me? Not sure what you mean. Which God? That's usually my first question. When somebody says God, I'm like, which God? Because we're not all religious supremacists. But the answer is usually the God, like the supreme God, the God that's the true God, is the God of whoever you're asking at the time. And even among people who believe in the same God, it's weird how they just like dismiss and discredit the other denomination's version of it. Like, and I think a lot of this is manufactured. Like that veteran who drove his truck into a Mormon church because the Mormon God, is it different from the Christian God? Is it different from the Muslim God? I don't know. King Ravana says Bezos is clocked, reading about a couple months back. Yeah, there's more that's worth looking into with that particular clock, Altar to Chronos. It had this opening ceremony, and it was attended by, I think his name is it Stephen Brand? Was it Richard Brandt? But the guy who put out the whole Earth catalog. So like in the 60s, there was this activist, this environmentalist who was trying to tell NASA that you got to show us the whole Earth. And until we see the whole Earth, we won't be able to make our case as environmentalists that it needs to be saved. And if you look at the function of blue marble, it really did catalyze the environmentalist movement. When they saw the Earth looking precarious, paper-thin atmosphere, man's on there like a parasite, the Earth needs to be saved, it reframed people's worldview, quite literally. Showing them the world itself changed their worldview. But he was there at the opening of this event, which is kind of interesting. The whole Earth catalog. Yes, Stuart Brand. Rilo05 says monotheism is religious supremacy. Right. Well, I look at religion, media, like news media, and entertainment as just branches of government. I don't even think it's useful to think of multiple governments. I think it's just one big government, one big G on top of everything. And if you still squabble in these little subgroups, then yeah, you're in their closed system. But from my perspective, there's only one. One of the big indicators of this is the ubiquitous agreement that they're all going to lie about space travel, that they're all going to lie about these missions. And whether or not you believe in that stuff, if you believe the space station's real, then you haven't done your research, because there are thousands of hoax indicators. And this is an important concept. When somebody says, I believe it's real, and you say, well, I don't because of these reasons, you have informed disbelief. Informed disbelief weighs more than low information belief. I saw it on the TV screen. So for them to have an equal opinion to yours, because they're not equal, their job would be to look at every single one of your hoax indicators and deal with it. I tried this with Red's rhetoric and Fight the Flat Earth, and I could not get them to address any of the indicators with regards to the ISS. In everything that I raised, every instance, their response was, well, we don't speak for NASA. Let's just talk about observations from the ground. And I was like, no, let's talk about this because this is relevant. And yet, they refused to deal with it. Smudgegate was a big one. I found on the ESA videos, there was a little dot on the Earth that you could see as the ISS is tracking around the globe. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute here. This dot is like as big as a city. And I don't think anybody's ever reported a shadow just passing over their entire city at random parts of the day. I mean, I'm in a place where I frequently have planes flying over and I get the shadows at certain times of the year, but I've never seen the ISS. Well, I've never seen the shadow from the ISS blacking out an entire city. So I'm looking at this smudge and I'm thinking, okay, this is another hoax indicator. And what got me was this thing is 284 miles up. It's the size of a football stadium, but it's mostly empty space. It's just a bunch of tubes. How is this creating such a shadow? So I did the math on it. I did some research. I consulted Reddit and Quora, and I'm like, well, would something this size make a shadow that big? And the general consensus was, well, no, it's impossible. Technically, but it wouldn't be perceivable. You wouldn't see it. But there would have to be some blockage, obviously. But no, it wouldn't create a dark circle, like a dark spotlight, like this black spot. So I looked at this thing and I collected footage of it, and I noticed only the European Space Agency's ISS footage has a shadow for the ISS. And if you look at the angle that it's going relative to the Earth, it is a shadow. It's just like, so I'm thinking to myself, whoever put this simulation together added a shadow effect. Because when you build a 3D environment, you add your light sources, and then you adjust the opacity of the shadows, lighter or darker. And they simply had a shadow that was too dark, but it was appropriately placed. It was the right angles. They did a good job. They just shouldn't have had it visible. So as we're talking about these things, they just dismissed it. And I think Red's Rhetoric said, oh, that's a smudge. That's a smudge. Red's Rhetoric offered to meet me in the desert at night to record the space station. And he never followed up on it, but he sounded mad. I was like, what's he going to do? Bury me? Where does he want to meet up? But he said that the shadow wasn't a shadow, that it was a smudge. So he's saying it's a smudge on the camera on the outside of the space station. And I'm thinking, looking at this, this is not coming from a video camera. This is quite literally a CGI environment. Well, the next thing we get to, since they wouldn't address anything from the ISS, I brought up the Challenger explosion, which Challenger explosion has some fascinating symbolism attached to it. The number 113, which, again, the One World Trade Tower rose from the ashes of 9/11, 11/3, 13 years later. 11/3/2014 is when they opened. But the Challenger exploded 1 minute, 13 seconds. The Space Shuttle Columbia, which exploded, was the 113th shuttle launch. So what's with 113 and this idea of the immolation? There's some kind of connection here, which is again a consistent thing when you look at these numbers. 113, 311, 119, 911. These numbers are consistently being represented in this ongoing script. Now, when it came to the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, I brought it up. And as soon as I suggested that nobody died, that it was just theater. And by the way, it happened on the 19th anniversary of Apollo 1, another immolation, like one day off. And it was also the anniversary of Sir Francis Drake dying at sea. Ronald Reagan talked about these things. He's like, just by coincidence, it's on the anniversary of Apollo 1. Maybe this had to happen to find us to care about NASA again. Because at that point, I guess nobody cared. But when I brought up the Challenger hoax, Fight the Flat Earth started crying. And I'm not talking crocodile tears, Erica Kirk, performative grief. No, he was bawling like a baby. And I kind of felt sorry for him. So I terminated the interview. I'm like, okay, we can stop. So that's how that ended. They didn't address the ISS. Implied they were going to bury me, and the other guy cried. Like, that was not a fruitful debate. But I only did it for Infinite Plane Society think tank members, just to show them the limits that you can go to with these individuals based on the boxes that they're in. Let me see what's up. In your comments here, we've got quite a few new people jumping in. Obrique says, Pentagon openly supports Hollywood movies. Oh, yeah. Like I said, the entertainment industry is a branch of government. Rock USA, Penguinati Auto Hoger. Sunkworks Extra says, images of the ISS from Earth look like Bigfoot photos. Well, there was this time where people would tell me that they would see the space station flying over their house at night, and I would trap them. So I did my research, and I, read that you can see it at certain times based on whether the sun is recently set or recently risen, because it needs a light source. But I did some research into the shadow of the Earth. So if the Earth is a 25K circumference ball, how big is the shadow, and how would this impact your ability to see anything above you after a certain hour? Because it would be in this column of darkness that they say extends 870,000 miles into space. So you got this deep shadow. The umbra of the Earth's shadow is where the low Earth orbit satellites would be. And if they're in that area, they cannot reflect the sun. So when somebody would tell me that they had seen the space station 3 times, I'd be like, well, maybe I could give you 1. But the other 2, you're lying, because it would be in the shadow of the Earth. And as soon as I put out there that the shadow of the Earth should preclude most of these alleged sightings, the sightings kind of stopped. It was almost like they couldn't make the same claims, and so they kind of backed off a little bit. But it just shows you how many people are just willing to, I think, just be dishonest. And I have this axiom here, which is, if there's a moving light in the sky, it's an airplane until proven otherwise. That is a rational point of view, especially in light of what happened at the beginning of the year in New Jersey, where there was a scare that they were being invaded by Chinese drones. And people were reporting drones. There were videos of drones, and it was a huge craze until the fire started in Los Angeles. But everyone is focused on these drones, the drone invasion. These things were going viral. And it turns out every single one of these drone sightings was an airplane. Every single one. Every single one of them. And how did they find out? They cross-referenced the drone with the airplane traffic. So my answer to this is, if you're going to claim that you've seen a spaceship, you need to provide your metadata. And you need to provide the app data that puts you in that place. If you can't provide that, your evidence doesn't make the table. So I'm not going to believe anything. I'm not a believer. I have to know it to be true. So don't expect me to believe it because you see it. And so I've raised the burden of proof when it came to ISS sightings, because people would send me videos of airplanes all the time, just like I saw happened in New Jersey. And I'm thinking, okay, people keep sending me videos of airplanes, and then I have to deal with it, and it makes it look like they have a point. There has to be a way to rule this out. And simple, metadata. Show us the location where you were. And funnily enough, a lot of the people would say, I don't remember where I was when I saw the space station. I saw the light in the sky. Like, where were you? What time? What day? I don't remember. And I was reminded of all these UFO sightings and reports where people claim they see lights in the sky and they wake up in a field somewhere, sometimes naked, not knowing when or where or what day it was, just like confused. And I'm starting to think that a lot of these ISS sightings might have been UFO abductees who had their memories erased. Because how else do you not remember when and where you were when you saw a spaceship? If you're like, I saw a light in the sky, some point in time, like, I'm sorry, that's not good enough, again, to be considered evidence. So we raised our standards of evidence, and no one has yet met it. HG says, was reading how Sora 2 AI has traditional Hollywood terrified and in decline. What's real, what's fake? Big changes ahead. Yeah, there has been this democratization of the tools of production, and it is a leveling of the playing field. It doesn't replace talent or creativity, but it is leveling the playing field. And I intend, and I have been, making use of it as best I can. All right, so moving on here, the bloody guardrails. So now's the time where we're actually listing the names of content creators and screen capping their specific statements where they say, I think Charlie Kirk kicked the bucket for real, that it wasn't fake. We're putting their names down. We're making lists because we're trying to define the guardrail. We're trying to show you, hey, this is the narrative guardrail. Here are the ones spending it. And if they don't want to be on that list, they can check whatever premise they accepted and maybe revise their thinking. If they won't revise their thinking, it's a huge red flag. If you claim to be about the truth and you have no ability to admit that's wrong, or you're paid to provide a wrong answer, it's going to become very clear, which guardrail is holding you back. So now when it comes to falsifiability, because someone had accused us of running a religion here, that calling it fake's a religion, like a dogma. No, it's quite the opposite. I didn't know the Charlie Kirk thing to be fake at first. I was like, okay, this looks real, looks shocking. Are there any indications otherwise? And 33 hours later, I think we had kind of come up with a pretty good idea of what we were actually looking at. But we do not rush to judgment. Believing it's real because it's on TV by default is a rush to judgment. That's problematic, not what we're doing. But at this point, if you're still ambiguous about it, what does it say about your methodology? If your approach to understanding the difference and making distinctions between real and fake is inadequate to this job, then what needs to happen is you need to update your system or admit defeat. Like, I am incapable of discerning real from fake when the news tells me to believe something. Like, I wouldn't want to be in that position, but if that is where you are, you will be noted as being stuck in Trutherville. So ambiguity means that you may not be defending the guardrail, like maybe it's fake, maybe it's real. It means that you're sitting on the bloody guardrail. And all you do is just touch it and see, is it corn syrup or is it blood? And I guarantee it's not blood. So if you can't take a stand, it means that you're confused or that you're not being objective, that you don't have a falsifiable model. Because any evidence that this thing was real would have sufficed for me to say it's real. Any evidence. But what would it take? How many hoax indicators does it take for someone to say, okay, I can unambiguously state that Charlie Kirk is still alive and probably drinking Coronas with Derek Chauvin and Charlie Kirk on Goat Island in New Zealand when they're not snorkeling? Like, how many hoax indicators do you need to arrive at some modicum of certainty that you can stand on? And I say this as an objectivist. Like, we're talking about objective analysis. And this does include predictive programming, which exists. Whether you like it or not, it exists. But so too does concurrent programming, which is even more damning evidence. It's conclusive, in fact. The real-time concurrent programming, Hulu, The Tempest, Heads of State, these are examples that what we're looking at would necessarily have to have been predicted, or not predicted, but scripted and scheduled in advance, even by decades. The only other explanation that you could have for this is psychic abilities or magic or something. Like, in other words, some divine fallacy, simulation theory, which is where Joe Rogan goes, which is where all the big channels go. I saw this big channel talking about snake eyes. And I said, well, look at Hulu. And I showed him my video. And his response was, my mind is blown. The fabric of reality has torn. So he just basically said, my operating system is incapable of computing this information. I cannot process this data. And we don't suffer from that problem. My mind is not blown by these, what media call eerie coincidences. Not at all. I'm not triggered by bloodshed on the fake news. And my mind isn't blown when I just watched it on Netflix the day before. And that's because of empirical research. We've been doing this consistently enough to where we predict the predictive programming. It shouldn't be like this. Like, oh, this event happened. Like, we did this with Butler. With Butler, we were looking very closely at Robert De Niro leading up to 7/3/2024 because he was displaying Trump derangement syndrome in a very public way. So we said, what roles does he have that might relate to the incoming Trump head wound? Because we were expecting it. And one of his roles was Senator McLaughlin, where he gets shot while giving a speech about how much he hates immigrants. That was in 2010. And that's one of like a dozen different movies we could point out. But we had already noted that De Niro was associated with this. He's associated with Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, which ties in the Reagan assassination, John Hinckley Jr. And then there's connections between the Reagan hoax assassination attempt, and the Trump assassination attempt. I mean, these are so intertwined that they're unbelievable. Like if you believe them, you just have low info. Because when you're fully apprised of all of the facts backing these up, it's no longer believable as objectively real, because reality doesn't happen like this. These are coordinated, scripted, pre-planned, and it's really no more mystical than a school planning fire drills for the next year. Like, these are scheduled events, and not everyone's in the know. A lot of people are surprised, but they can schedule things long term. So we're talking about history bending. You know, I spoke a lot about news bends, mandatory watching. We're looking at history bending. It's not just 5 years in advance. And this, again, this is an important point. The psyops that contain, all of them do, the relevant entertainment programming corresponds to the psyop, would have been created after the psyop itself was written as a script and planned to be inserted into the timeline. Then the artists, the directors, simply have to add some content into their movies that relate to that original script. And this shows you why 9/11, for example, could have decades of this content, so many different sources with such specificity to the same basic set of symbols and numbers and themes. Erica Creech says 3 attackers hit churches, Nash, Minnesota, and Kirk. That's good. That's good. Because I mentioned how in Tempest, his corresponding entertainment character is in a church when he's shot in the neck. Looked like the church where Charlie Kirk actually was, but Kirk meaning church. So Nash, Minnesota, and Kirk. That is an intriguing connection. Anime Gematria says, guess what was the name of my DoorDasher today? I'm guessing either Tyler or Kirk. You tell me. Now, there's another point here as well. I believe they kicked this off with JFK, where they said, if you don't accept the burden of proof, as in if you don't believe it, even if provide all the evidence, you're a conspiracy theorist. Logically speaking, the burden of proof is on the media to provide the evidence for all of its claims. If it can't do that, you're not obliged to believe it. Like if somebody's lying to you and you know they're lying and they give you decent evidence, you're under no obligation to believe their lie. Imagine somebody's lying to you and you know they're lying and they call you a conspiracy theorist for not believing them. Well, the problem there is they shove the burden of proof onto you. And since you know better, you're like, well, no, I'm not going to believe you. You have to supply more evidence. Well, the same dynamic should exist with media. I mean, it's safe to say it's lying until proven otherwise, but when it comes to any of their claims, if you don't have enough evidence to believe it, treat it like a lie. Ask for more or don't believe it. So I consider what we do here, our approach here, is designed to lead us to the most information possible. And if that means not believing it, it means you're an informed disbeliever. I know why I don't believe this thing. So the burden of proof question is important because those who say they still believe he might have died or they're ambiguous, the burden of proof is on them to prove it actually happened. Like we've effectively shoved it back. If you have 10 or 15 pretty solid contradictions to the official story, again, these hoax indicators, that's enough to say I'm not obliged to believe it or even it's fake until proven real. Given the past precedent, shout out to Nicotramus, 100% of the stuff is fake. Sounds extreme, but you wouldn't be wrong if you were to say that. I don't, for strategic reasons, rhetorical reasons, for education reasons, but yeah, that's actually a pretty safe assumption. Fake until proven real is a pretty good way to approach things in the age of generative AI. That's like, I saw this video today of a child giving candy is a doorbell camera. He was giving candy to a huge crocodile or alligator, and the alligator was about to eat the kid, and the mom comes out, and then she slaps the alligator or crocodile, and then she pulls her kid inside and saves his life. And it gets millions of hits, and eventually somebody figures out that they made it with AI. So your DoorDasher's name was Osman. Yeah, the names are another thing too. We talk about the numbers, the dates, the themes, the names. Like Erica had mentioned here about the name Kirk. Erica Creech mentioned 3 attackers in Minnesota and Kirk. But the names are a consistent facet of the fakery. The guy who shot, or the alleged shooter, and you'll notice the bifurcation here. Mainstream Republicans believe it was Tyler Robinson, a leftist, Antifa, likely a communist. But the woke right believe it was Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel did it. So they have 2 different opinions on who did it. The mainstream believes the mainstream story. The woke believes this alternative story. And this is all the way down the line. Both sides, though, agree he's dead. So both sides are behind the bloody guardrail. They're both lying. But this is, of course, by design. And it's predictable. We predicted who was going to run with what particular theories. But look at the name Tyler Robinson, and then you had Robin Westman, the Annunciation school shooter. Well, there are connections between the Annunciation school shooter and the movie Weapons, which connects with the number 217, some attempt at banning assault weapons, and it referenced the number of votes on the bill. But Weapons deals with this theme of school shootings, gun violence, which ironically, and again, real life isn't this ironic that Charlie Kirk is talking about gun violence when he gets gunned down, but the insinuation that the shooter had a trans girlfriend, or the shooter himself might have been trans, and an activist, that this was like a repeat of Annunciation shooter, these same elements. And if you didn't notice the change, the psyops went from poor white bowl cut racist neo-Nazi shooters, sometimes with MAGA hats like Nick Cruz, anti-immigrant shooters. It went from that, which did not frighten the right wing, to the satanic trans shooters radicalized on Reddit who shoot up children in Christian schools. This started in 2022 with Audrey Hale. But the witchcraft thing is something I'm drawing attention to, the Satanism thing. But also, now the shooters are coming from the left. So now you have a left-wing shooter associated with this new archetype. They've replaced the bowl cut shooter with this new archetype. So this shooter matches the Annunciation shooter who's shooting a school, who is repeating in real life the message of the movie Weapons. Well, who's the shooter in the movie Weapons? Well, it's not a shooter. It's actually a school shooting analogy. It's actually witchcraft. And the witch has the same red hair as the Annunciation shooter, who was also associated with the Order of 9 Angels, had a pentagram on the gun. So you have this repeated element here. The idea here is the attack on Christianity, Satan versus Christianity. The quote, gender ideology is an attack on traditional morals. And so you see how they've repackaged the shooter to frighten the other side. So now you have this connection with, again, the shooter at Annunciation was Robin, and then you had Tyler Robinson. So you have these repeated names that also tend to overlap. But the fact that you have the same archetype being used in a movie, in a shooting, and then the Kirk shooting. And then what's more, in the movie about the witch with the red hair, wiping out the room full of children. The only child who survived was Alex Lilly, an obvious allusion to Adam Lanza. The movie has pretty ham-fisted symbolism about guns. It even has a big gun with 217 on it. The children disappeared at 217. Anyone care to guess the address of Turning Point USA there in Illinois? 217 is the street address. How many people were killed at Annunciation? Well, it was 2 killed, 17 injured. All the initial reports, 217, 217. Later, they modified it to 218, but still, it was hit with 217. Now, going back to Audrey Hale, and this is intriguing because you're looking at, again, a repeated set of circumstances. So Audrey Hale's shooting of a Christian church, Covenant, lots of 33 all over that one, but had a manifesto, implied satanic stuff, shot the stained glass of Adam, killing Adam. Other associations here, the whole trans shooter thing with satanic elements involved, started with this. And this one was really hyped up by Jack Posobiec, who also kicked off Pizzagate. So we're talking about this satanic panic theme. Well, do you know what the theme is in the Stranger Things TV show? It takes place during the satanic panic in the 80s. Now, the 217 happens to correlate to the Uvalde school shooting. Same set of numbers. It was like 2 injured, 17 killed. So the 217 was repeated there. When Stranger Things season finale was airing, they had to put a warning label because the opening scene is when the main character, 11, just killed a bunch of kids. This wasn't the only show that, the FBI season finale was pulled because it was about a school shooting and completely mirrored the circumstances of an off-duty officer stopping the shooting. Uvalde was stopped by an off-duty Border Patrol agent. So they actually wiped that episode. You couldn't even see it. But the connection here is Stranger Things, satanic panic, the character L, who kills all the kids, happens to be essentially a twin of Audrey Hale, who shoots up the Covenant school. So you have this school shooter, looks just like this character out of Stranger Things, who's part of the Hellfire Club, against the backdrop of the satanic panic. My point here is, again, the movies bring out this threat, and then it's reflected in the psyops directly. And this is just on repeat. But they have been telegraphing these new shooters as not coming from the right, not coming from Nazi, white nationalist shooters, but now it's all leftist ideologues with manifestos. Dark Ghost Wind says, you ask people about Order of Nine Angels and they say, they just want to cause misery and chaos, but why? They don't do stuff like that for no reason. Order of Nine Angels, as far as I can tell, is likely a front, just the feds. I don't think it's real. I have to look at their books. Do they have any publications? It's just not congruent. Not actually all that congruent when you look at the idea of mixing Nazi fascism. And this shooter for the Annunciation was promoting Nazi fascism and satanic stuff and leftist stuff, and just didn't really seem like it made sense. Just like with this Tyler Robinson, but they're designed to not make sense. They created Tyler Robinson to look like a patsy. That's Candace Owens' job, to make him look like a patsy so they can blame Israel. And just as they did with JFK, maintain dialectic between woke right and mainstream Republicans, and also woke right versus the woke left. It's all about maintaining their positions, and they're not going to change. Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, Owen Schroyer, they were always going to arrive at this conclusion. It's predictable. I predicted InfoWars is going to say, second shooter, that it wasn't Thomas Crooks that shot Trump's ear. And that's exactly what they did. The next day, Owen Schroyer's there talking about there's another shooter on the water tower. See, these are templates. They're not investigators. Candace Owens is not an investigator. None of these individuals are. They're not looking for facts. They're not seeking clues. They're not driving around in a mystery van trying to figure out who done it so they can pull the mask off and show you. No, they have a way of asking questions that are loaded that already insinuate who they think did it. and they will run with anything that contradicts the mainstream. And again, this is allowed to happen. What none of them talk about, what isn't discussed whatsoever, is this idea that Charlie Kirk isn't even dead. And if that's not your starting point, you're stuck in Trutherville. You're still mind controlled. You're still following the program, because the alternative media is still programmed. It's alt programming. It's alt shadows on the wall. But alternative media doesn't take you outside of the world stage paradigm itself. Not at all. In fact, if you're in it, if you're in the alternative realm, you're deeper in the matrix. Although you're closer to getting out if you can jump over the bloody guardrails. But a lot of people can't. Pete Shea says, Tim, all the fakers are revealed by the inability to consider Kirk not dead. All the ball liars exposed immediately. Yeah, this is the new litmus test. Forget Sandy Hook, forget 9/11. It's all about CK now. If your starting point is he's dead or he might be dead, then you're holding the burden of proof for the MSM. You are a propaganda mule. You're not a skeptic, you're a believer, because you still defaulted to the mainstream. The only acceptable position for a skeptic right now is an informed non-believer. Not ambiguous at this point. Not with Charlie Kirk. If you think there's room for ambiguity here, let me know where. Because the concurrent programming, the predictive programming on this one is way too nuanced to hand wave away. We can hand wave away your belief in the mainstream. We can hand wave away your claims of ambiguity, because those are worthless claims and they have no standing. Ollie Goering says Charlie Kirk clutchers. The people who still buy into politics are at a disadvantage here. And what was so, I think, effective with Trump when he came into this whole scene was the Trump administration, their whole campaign, they were able to entice the conspiracy theorists to join them. When the Vegas hoax happened, we lost a lot of really good researchers to Q, because they said, oh, these conspiracies are all true, but Trump's going to save us. In fact, I had a lot of people, and I think these were all agents. They would say to me, never live, but these would be in private calls. They would say, it's really courageous of you. You're so brave to talk about this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, the media considers us cranks. Like nobody's going to squib me. No one's coming after any of us. We can say whatever the heck we want. There's no reason to be afraid. But they were trying to make me afraid. But what they also said was, you don't have to worry about talking about these events because we have white hats on our side. So I was told about white hats before Q by these shady people. And one of them had said to me repeatedly, many times, all you need to do is sit back and enjoy the show, have some popcorn, because they're going to fix it. And it actually worked. How many people did they sweep up out of the body of conspiracy researchers? How many of them became QAnoners? Too many. Dark Ghost Wind says, that makes me wonder, do these guys use all the same writers? It's so predictable and done in the same style. They definitely use templates. There's a formula here. It's formulaic. You have and we're seeing it now. They have the false leads, what I call truther bait, and they use that to trap the people who immediately want to call it fake. They're trying to discredit us. They want to make it look like we have poor judgment. And the way they're discrediting us is they're saying, hey, look, they got this date wrong in Snake Eyes. It wasn't, it was the 19th. So they plant bad information. What's up, Diana Southard? Thank you for joining. This is Infinite Planes Sunday. I apologize for confusing anybody. I legitimately thought it was Saturday. But that's because I missed yesterday. And so I need to stay in sync with this. "777 says, the J pill pushers are becoming lame now. They used to at least make good nose jokes. Yeah, J pill was very low info. And if you don't know what J pill is, it's the opposite of the woke pill. So the wokesters believe that whites or whiteness as a construct runs the world, that it is the oppressor. So what's central to wokeness is the oppressor and the oppressed. So if you're a woke person, you're recognizing that you're part of a system that's oppressing you, and you've identified the oppressor, and it is whiteness. And this is why you have white privilege, this idea that a lot of people benefit from the system because it is designed for this. That's on the far left. But on the far right, they have an equal, as far as its architecture, an equal argument. But for them, it's the Jays control the world. It's Jewishness. It's Jewish world domination. So you have these identical ways of looking at the world, just different oppressors. So the people in the woke right, and you can hear them in their own words. Nick Fuentes literally says, "I am oppressed by Israel." They believe Israel controls all the governments. This is why they were so obsessed with Epstein, because they believed Epstein was being used by Mossad to compromise American politicians so Israel could control America. They actually believe this. So they believe that Charlie Kirk was going to go the direction of Nick Fuentes and fight the power structure, so they had to kill him. That's their basic story. My point here is that these things are templated on predictable responses, and they want everyone in these containers. The thing about the J pill, however, which we call woke right because it's a mirror of woke left, is that at the core of all the red pill conspiracies is the J pill. So all the red pill conspiracies are actually just euphemisms. Like, oh, it's the reptiles that run the world. It's the Jesuits that run the world. It's the EGIs that run the world. It's the fill in the blank. Behind every one of these explanations, the mudflutters say it's the parasites. These are all euphemisms because you can't mainstream ethnic hatred or targeting in that same way. That's why David Icke's books have been pulled off of shelves for years when he's like, the reptiles run the world, because he mixes reptiles with Rothschilds. And there are still some people who think that you can point to the Rothschilds and say they run the world. Well, according to the script that they provided for you, that's the case. But if you lean left, you can find just as much evidence that the world's run by a white power structure. So it's actually quite subjective. I would argue, too, that all of the world stage belief systems are ultimately objective, and they're not mutually exclusive. You know, we have, like, we live in this multiverse, like these intersecting verses, and we coexist, like the bumper sticker shows. MSM, MSM plus. They coexist because they all agree on the basic parameters. We're the ones who cannot coexist. You know, our perspective is not even acknowledged. The mainstream will deal with the conspiracy theorists all day and call them crazy, but they won't deal with us, the people calling it fake. They won't say squib. I happen to think that the word squib is probably banned, prohibited. You cannot get Candace Owens to say squib. They managed to get Nick Fuentes to talk about predictive programming and snake eyes. And you know what he did? He said the only way this makes sense is if there's time travel and reptilians involved. Like, he just basically dismissed it by appealing to ridicule and straw manning it. He didn't take it seriously, but he did ask. He said, explain it to me. Somebody make it make sense. And I figured I should send, if I had his address, I would send him a copy of my book. Because it makes sense if you're looking at history bending. So I would even put this forth somewhat as a challenge. If you think we live in a simulation because of all the stuff we're talking about, it's probably because you're experiencing cognitive overload. Because we are pointing out patterns that sound rather arcane, and it might even sound convoluted. I don't think it does, but my point is, if you're going to posit in all seriousness that this is evidence that we live in a simulation or a matrix, I would say, with that explanation against history bending, it's one or the other. Can't be both. Either history is being bent, or there's another explanation that we haven't arrived at. Let me see here. Erica Creech says, On Kirk's rising awareness, it is nuanced to the current situation, I believe. Yeah, they've gone back and forth. So the Candace Owens line was he was going to reject funding from Israel and he was going to turn on them and he had to be taken out. And that's probably a plot line because what we're looking at here is a play. This is theater. And so we're looking at a theater of a conspiracy to take him out. So it's not true, but it's actually a planted storyline that you could actually believe. Now, you wouldn't know it to be true, but you could believe it to be true. And if you have the predisposition to believe that these are the bad guys, that explanation will suffice. But the fact that he's not dead, that he was squibbed, completely flies in the face of the J pill, the red pill, and the mainstream version, which is why none of them talk about it. And Charlie Kirk was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, look at his appearance. You know, he's made to look very soft, gentle, wouldn't hurt a fly, no flaws. He didn't live long enough to have any major scandals. I mean, he's a construct. And look how many of those people at that event were crying, fusing their religious fervor with politics, not knowing that they're being lied to by a bunch of career psychological operation activists or operatives, career propagandists. He was a propaganda agent. He was a troll. You have been trolled. There was nothing about him legitimate, and you shouldn't be thinking with your heart when you look at world stage psyops opera. It's just theater. And if you cried when he died, understand we're humans. But now that we have a more objective analysis, we should realize, okay, we got trolled. We got fooled here. "777 says the J pill has been more of a meme than anything they took escape. No, actually, the J pill has a historic precedent going back to the idea of blood libel. And it's all just recycled. Like the adrenochrome. No one talks about adrenochrome. That comes from blood libel. The idea that Christian babies were having their blood drained from them or something. And that's why it's so effective. When these psyops have satanic or evil anti-Christian shooters targeting Christian children, it's meant to, because psyops are targeting people based on whatever they believe. It's very much specific to their beliefs and superstitions. So it's not just a meme, it's actually a new iteration of an old idea, just like the reptilian thing. And if you remember, back when reptilians were trending, people believed that celebrities were reptilians, usually based on some video of an interview recorded off of somebody's TV where the person's eye seemed to blink funny in one frame, like the lizard eye showed itself. And people were like, oh, Britney Spears, she's a reptilian. Bill Clinton, reptilian. Oh, they're all reptilians. They're all reptiles. Nobody believes that anymore. But if you recognize that reptilian was always a euphemism, and it all leads to the J pill, always has. So again, it's just dialectic. I call it critical race theory versus critical Israel theory. It's the same exact thing. And they're fools on both sides. They're deep in the matrix on both sides. But you can get rid of your red pills because they're all fake. And you just, first I thought that the red pills were just blue pills painted red. Harder stuff for the people who aren't buying the mainstream propaganda. But it turns out that in between the blue and the red coating, it's actually green, the J pill. Whatever color you want to make it. The J pill is the fundamental core of conspiracy theories, all of them. JFK, who killed JFK? Who did 9/11? Who did fill in the blank? It's this recurring scapegoat. But again, it's just a template. So we're talking about why people respond to these things in predictable ways. It's templated. 777 says, it's all planted and seeded by the programmers, and the frogs think they're going to will it into reality with meme magic. Yeah, I remember the meme magic stuff. They said Donald Trump was 7 years old, 7 months, and 7 days when he got sworn in. And they made all these fascinating connections. And this is something else that exists. So you do see connections between events, between various facets of the theater, not just the movies, but you see a lot of stuff that has to do with like numerology or numbers of days between events. And people will look at this stuff and they'll say, there's no way man could have done that. And they're right. But what they're wrong in doing is treating that as primary evidence of staging when it's actually something that they added onto it. So that would be like a secondary connection, and it gets into the realm of subjectivity. And we're approaching this from an objective point of view. So The Tempest, guy shot in the neck, 9/10/2025. That's pretty objective. You can't really refute that. But if I say the movie The Tempest probably references Shakespeare's The Tempest, and there's a widow in that play. So I might make a connection there, but that would be a secondary connection. It wouldn't be evidence of scripting, even though it might be entirely accurate because it falls in the realm of the artistry that goes into the writing, but it's not evidence our point of view. And a lot of the connections that people forge with numbers are not exactly primary evidence or direct evidence, but they're in fact inferred, they're deduced from, maybe there's even a logic to it, and they might be right. But again, people can manufacture connections that are kind of fallacious. You could, if you use more than one calculator to make these connections, you're reaching. And you're reaching from a wide pool of information where you can make anything fit. It's what we call the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where you fire a bunch of rounds and then you paint the target after the fact. And you only circle the close groups. So you look like a sharpshooter when you're all over the place. We are not all over the place. Mango says, the mind war has been over for me for some time. Yeah, well, same here. It really has been. Like, I haven't reacted, even though I thought the Charlie Kirk thing might be real when I first saw it. I didn't react to it as though it was real. Not at all. I was like, yeah, it looks real. It doesn't mean it is. And that's an important point, because magic shows convince you that magic's real. At least they convince your eyes. You can be fooled. You can be duped. Illusions are a common facet of this. Ryler05 says, decorating with Cody, obnoxious multi-calculator user. Right, and a lot of these guys are just noise. So we're aiming for more signal than noise. What they do is they flood the zone with noise. So we've already established Snake Eyes, Tempest, Emerson Drive, Heads of State. We've established the same actress plays Vice President Kirk as the blonde woman next to Charlie Kirkland who gets shot in this other movie. We've already established these connections. There's no need to throw in gematria calculators, which is numerology. There's no reason to add in what you could consider to be the mystical stuff, because the gematria connections could not have been planted there by the directors of these movies. These gematria connections are proof positive that God did it, the simulation did it, a higher power did it. But it's not good evidence. It's actually wrong, but they use it as such. So what I'm thinking is someone like Decoding with Cody, his job is to try to rule out man as the cause by throwing in a bunch of stuff man could not have done. One of the common refrains I used to hear from simulation people was, there's no way that man could do this. This is higher than man. Well, the only reason they arrive at higher than man is because they're looking at this noise that has been thrown in on top of our objective evidence, stuff that man could not have done. No, there's no way some director said, let's release this movie so that 6,666 days later, this event happens and this person will, like, no, that's obviously not a direct hit. That's adding on and making stuff fit. Retrofitting, making it fit, ignoring all the misses, you would actually call it selectivity bias. We don't have a selectivity bias. We actually have a methodology here. The reason why I even looked at Tempest anyway is that it's a #1 movie series in Japan, in Taiwan, in South Korea. Like if it's trending, if it's pushed, that's very much an indicator that, okay, this is going to contain relevant programming that's going to hit the same demographics targeted by the psychological warfare op. In this case, the killing a Christian Republican youth leader. They created a martyr. All right, let me continue with the notes. There's so much that we have been going over. And I'm glad to see that we're not the only one. So not only are we taking names of the people who are stuck behind the bloody guardrail or sitting on it, the ambiguous ones, we're listing their names because they're self-discrediting, but we're also listing all the names of those who figured it out, who have looked at the Charlie Kirk thing objectively enough to recognize that nobody actually died that day. So I have a few there. I'm not going to play them here, but I'm going to provide you some links. IFEP73 said, at the end of the movie Snake Eyes, they show the construction workers at the arena. Just like after the Charlie Kirk assassination, they showed yeah, that's right. They made a big deal about showing how they tore it all up and they're building on top of it. Yeah, exactly, copaesthetic. Texas sharpshooting and confirmation biasing with Cody. That's what it's not decoding. It's Texas sharpshooting and confirmation biasing. They don't have any predictive capabilities here. There's nobody who said, hey, I checked on my gematria calculator, I added the dates, and next week this will happen. Now, I'm making a prediction, though, because I can make predictions because I'm recognizing patterns that are authentic. My prediction is the gematria calculator predictors are going to make predictions that something big is going to happen at the Super Bowl. Not saying that it won't occur. I'm just saying that it's not even much of a prediction. Like everybody knows, the Super Bowl is a very hyped up event. They would be remiss if they didn't indulge us with a little mystery Babylon fertility rites or some other kind of occult mumbo jumbo, which is what they always do. It's predictable. Ryler says the roast of Donald Trump in 2011 has programming. Oh, Trump's in front of a $1,000 bill with Grover Cleveland's face. Was he assassinated? Cleveland. I'm still thinking back. On 6/11, okay, now this is a connection because this stuff goes beyond just the movies. You know, we're not just talking about movies here. On 6/11, where was Donald Trump? This last June 11th. Now remember, on 6/11, he was at the JFK Center and he was watching a play. And I think this was actually, what was the play that they watched? Les Mis or something. So he's at a play at the JFK Performance Arts Center. But in the photo, you see Donald Trump posing and he has his hands out and the hue from the lighting makes his hands look like stigmata, like they're red. But right behind his head is a gigantic bust of JFK's head. So it's like Trump as JFK being conflated. And this is on 6/11. Well, what time was Trump shot? 6/11. So this is subtle. You know, I mean, to me, it's subtle. It's predictable. So like, well, there's some significance because of these numbers are reoccurring in association with the same theme. In this case, the headshot. What about the rubber? Yeah, we could talk about the rubber, the rock for a minute. We went through the eerie coincidences. Erica Kirk busted. Again, if you missed it, she said in her comment about Tyler and how they had a blast shooting the thing, she actually commented on September 10th 2012. 13 years to the day. Charlie Kirk and the Tempest Metascript, we've covered that. Snake Eyes, predictive programming. I have all these listed on my blog, timosman.substack. Erica Kirk, Snake Eyes connections. Again, these just go deeper. And as I said before, I was going to check out the Marilyn Manson connections because One Assassination Under God is the tour he's on. And his album came out on 11/22 of last year, the 61st anniversary of the JFK event. And we thought this has got to be foreshadowing for something. It happened after the Trump thing. And they're not taking Trump out this way because all the relevant predictive programming has him surviving it. So what could this mean? And now that I think about it, this Charlie Kirk thing, having concluded that it had to have been planned at least 27 years ago, 30 years ago, this was planned to be a generational psyop, a JFK event. The JFKification of Charlie Kirk is all by design. Like MLK, JFK, they created a martyr. And I believe that that album, that song, and the timing of the tour would likely constitute relevant concurrent programming and predictive programming for the incoming event, which it did, because he's touring against this as a backdrop. So I looked a little closer, and I found quite a lot in that particular song in the video, connecting it with King Kill 33, which also connects to the Charlie Kirk thing. So if you don't know about King Kill 33, it's this breakdown of the symbolism around the JFK assassination. It's really one of the original Metascript decodes in existence. And Manson wrote a song called King Kill 33, so he's in the know about this. So I looked a little closer, and it turns out on his set list, he ends the show with One Assassination Under God, which has a chorus about how we're all just being entertained. And then the following song and the closing song is called Coma White. Well, Coma White had some controversy attached to it back in 1999. So around the time of Snake Eyes. The video has to do with JFK as Christ coming back. And so we've talked about this Christification of CK. Well, JFK in this video is basically treated as the second coming of Christ. And in the video, Manson himself portrays JFK getting assassinated. And so I watched the video, and anyone care to guess where he gets shot? And this is why it's significant. The two songs back to back. One Assassination Under God, Coma White. First one, reference assassination. And the second one has him being assassinated. He's shot in the neck. And it's a 1999 video. And it is pretty much, I think, an example of what we would consider to be Metascript content in the music. Andrea says CJK, MLK, JFK, all ending Ks. Yeah. Oh, Erica Kirk, unfortunately, has 3 Ks. But all the popular stuff contains relevant content. Like, and I pointed out his work, and I thought there would be a clue there because JFK Jr. died, and as a result, his video for the song was delayed because the script for the video is about JFK Jr. as the third Jesus. And so the timing of it was just kind of conspicuous, and MTV even did a press release on it and got statements on it, which in retrospect looks really strange. But they made a point. And this was after the album's videos were delayed anyway because of the association with the Littleton shooters, Colorado, which really kicked off this, quote, epidemic of mass shootings, what Barack Obama called them. So Bad Bunny was on SNL. I saw some clips. Obviously, the courting outrage. There's got to be some significance to it, though. So last year, at the Super Bowl. Was it last year? Was it Brock Purdy? Was it 49ers versus the Ravens? I don't know. Brock Purdy was the quarterback? Or was it the previous one? But when Brock Purdy was quarterback, it was a previous one. Everyone was saying he looked like Lee Harvey Oswald. And I had just pointed out that Lee Harvey Oswald had entered the world stage. And this would have been 2023, summer of 2023, when Robert Crimo shot up the 4th of July parade. The guy with the 47 tattooed on his head, the 47 on his cars, the guy who was always going to Trump rallies, dressed like Waldo from Where's Waldo. I said, where's Oswaldo at the time? Because it seemed like they had put Lee Harvey Oswald back into play. Turns out Robert Crimo had, Lee Harvey Oswald on his wall, like he worshipped the guy. He had some affection for Lee Harvey Oswald. And he has the 47 symbolism and stuff. So there was already this narrative building. Well, then we have the quarterback, Purdy, and they said he looked like Lee Harvey Oswald. And how much sense does that make? Well, if you look at the bigger picture, I think it starts to connect, especially if you look at the consecutive Super Bowl halftime shows. There's something emerging here. And I think it relates to The Weeknd. And The Weeknd has all sorts of connections to this head wound scenario. Even his name, Abel, like Cain and Abel, or Abe Lincoln. And if you remember, he came out on the Super Bowl with like bandages on his head, like he had a head wound. So it's been a theme with him, is this head wound theme. He even received some kind of music award on 11/22, where he's holding this black pyramid thing and he's got this head wound. And then he did this video called Save Your Tears. And Save Your Tears is a video that takes place on a theater stage where The Weeknd puts a gun to his head and this woman tries to stop him. He pulls the trigger and it just shoots out confetti. And everybody claps. They applaud his fake head wound. You could add to it a few other elements when it comes to The Weeknd's work that ties into this head wound theme. But the fact that he did a halftime show with a head wound, now you got a quarterback they're calling Lee Harvey Oswald. If you look at this over time, you see pieces put into place. Like they're setting up scenes, setting up jokes. When I was in film studies, they said, my teacher was emphasizing that if the movie's good, any object, any reference that you see early in the movie, if it takes up even one frame, it should necessarily have some significance later. So you can look at everything as somewhat predictive in that sense. Go through your comments. Sunworks Extra says, did you know that Superman fought KK in the comics? In the comics. That's right. In the comics, he infiltrated or something. He exposed the actual clan handshakes. I recall reading about that. Now, the Superman thing ties into the story because Charlie Kirk was compared to the Man of Steel for stopping a bullet with his neck. But if you look at Lex Luthor in the new Superman, he looks like Tyler Robinson in that specific photo in the Dairy Queen where he's posing next to a Superman poster. Superman is very much Christ-coded in terms of the archetypes, the sun symbolism, the numerology. So there's that connection. But you have Lex Luthor and Superman. Superman associated with Kirk. And then I look at the governor of Utah, and he looks just like Lex Luthor. Like the bald-headed guy who said, it took us 33 hours to catch him. I was praying for 33 hours that it would be one of their guys. He had this bizarre statement. But yeah, he does look exactly like Lex Luthor. Yeah, I saw that deprogrammed truther. The Dairy Queen had been emptied out. Very fishy. Another hoax indicator. I mean, they really did clean up the crime scene right after. What I find most striking about it is that the chair he was sitting in, I mean, you're trying to convict the shooter and you want to get the angles right. You want to eliminate any other possibility. They moved the chair so he could grab a drive out of the camera. And even that seems to be a story because, we had to give it to the FBI. We had to keep it out of the hands of internet psychos who might publish it. Well, how come Candace Owens got to see it? And she used it to say there was no blood behind him, which was to make the idea that it had to have been a smaller caliber round or maybe an exploding microphone. Or it had to make any of the conspiracy theories valid and eliminate Antifa as the culprit, eliminate Tyler Robinson. I don't know yet, but I wouldn't be shocked. I don't know if she plans to, but if Candace Owens doesn't do a crowdfund to free Tyler Robinson, I'll be surprised because she's convinced he's some kind of MK Ultra shooter. And the idea of the MK Ultra mind-controlled assassin harkens back to the Manchurian Candidate, directed by John Frankenheimer, who's associated with the Kennedys and even drove RFK to his own assassination by mind-controlled assassin Saran. I mean, even having the director there, that's insane. Copaesthetic says, I appreciate all your work. Thank you very much. Erica Creek, I appreciate you, Tim. My faith is unfalsifiable, as you say. Thanks for putting up with me. No, we appreciate your comments and your participation. And I don't have any beef with religious faith. My real contention here is that faith in media is problematic because religions don't claim to be the they don't have the position in our life of media. It's a faith-based organization. Spirituality, media pretends to be objective. However, they fall far short of that, and they actually supply you with alternative belief systems that are tantamount to a new religion that maintain the same structures of religions but redefine things and put it in a context that it's assumed to be based on science. Like the same people who don't believe in angels or don't believe in God have accepted counterparts. So Gaia, the God construct, is essentially a replacement for a God. It's essentially, like I said, a God construct. But you could say the same thing with like aliens. You can be an atheist and believe in aliens. Well, how are aliens different from angels? They're not. These are angels repackaged. It's syncretic creation. Ribo Nation says the original ending of Snake Eyes was going to be the storm outside, destroying the arena and killing everyone inside. Sodom and Gomorrah type ending. Fascinating. There was a JFK reference in Snake Eyes after the shooting. There's quite a few references in there. There's even a number 910 someone had pointed out. Then you had the guy, Synchromorpheus pointed this out. There's a guy screaming, "Here comes the pain." And he looks just like the guy who was screaming, "USA, USA," after Kirk was shot. Now, the Snake Eyes has the backdrop of the storm, the Jezebel, Hurricane Jezebel, which we've connected to Erica because she was called the Storm. And you can see how Erica is connected to Snake Eyes. And then you have the Tempest, based on Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk, but mostly on Erica. And the Tempest, again, is a storm. And the last episode I saw, it's getting into the area that people are suspecting her of being behind the assassination. And that's one of the elements of the conspiracy theory. If Charlie Kirk was taken out by someone other than an angry leftist or an Antifa, then she is implicated in this, as is TP USA. Candace Owens is suggesting that Turning Point USA are all very suspicious because they're not interested in the conspiracy theories. She thinks they're part of the cover-up. Ryler says, look up Grover Cleveland. All right, let's see here. Oh, 1946, Superman fought the Ku Klux Klan on the radio to help dismantle their power in the real world. Oh, that's fascinating. Someone tell me, or let me know, what is it about Cleveland that I should be looking for? I'm about to use Perplexity. I just got Comet, which is the desktop version. I haven't even tested it out yet. Anime Gematria says Tyler Hoechlin, who plays CW Superman, was born on September 11th. Hey, these birth dates are highly significant. Charlie Kirk's birthday is coming up. Are you all going to celebrate on 10/14? I'm actually going to celebrate George Floyd's birthday. Maybe I'll do both. So 10/14, they both have the same birthday. And I talked about this on September 9th even. I said, look, with this subway killing, you see the right clamoring for a white George Floyd. White Lives Matter kicked off. You even had the white square trending on Twitter. Elon Musk said that we want to put murals of this girl all over America. He offered $1 million and he set up, $10,000 grants for artists to do murals. But before that plan was realized, Kirk got shot. Well, Charlie Kirk was the subject of discussion on CNN the night before with Van Jones, and they were talking about how the right was attempting to turn the subway killing into their own version of George Floyd. So this was already being talked about. Then Kirk dies, and I said, this is their George Floyd. And I went further to say, if you look at the extremes, woke left, woke right, as we discussed earlier, they each have their oppressor narrative. And on the extremes, and this is looking at these two events, George Floyd and Charlie Kirk represent victims of the oppressor for each side. So if you're far left, the oppressor killed George Floyd, systemic racism. If you're on the far right, your oppressor killed Charlie Kirk, Israel. You see how neatly that fits? So they're each martyrs for their cause, but they have opposite views on who the oppressor is. So from the outside, it doesn't quite comport unless you're familiar with the political horseshoe model and how all the fake news is designed to comport to it, because this is how they maintain this controlled dialectic. This is the reason why the woke right needs anybody but Tyler as the culprit, so that they can make it fit their template. I'm pulling up my note here because I have something on this specifically. God, it's quite a lot. I was going to say The Atlantic did an article 2 days ago. So I talked about this on the day. I said, watch Charlie Kirk because of his birthday. His birthday is going to be celebrated as a national holiday on the 14th. Because his birthday and George Floyd's birthday are the same, I started to put this together. I said, hey, wait a minute here. This is part of the engineered narrative. And they want conflict on that day. So looking into it, I'm like, okay, this actually makes perfect sense. Parallel martyrs, it's the duality, black and the white. They look opposite from the outside, but they're actually representative of the oppressed, of their particular oppressor. Anyway, I put this article out there, martyrs on the left, martyrs on the right. And 2 days ago, The Atlantic did a piece, and this has been widely reacted against because a lot of people don't like the comparison. But hey, I don't write the scripts. I'm just pointing out what I have seen here. So the article is The Atlantic, the other martyr. MAGA has found its George Floyd. And I have a few pull quotes from it, but this is from The Atlantic. It was just published a couple of days ago. For the left, Floyd's asphyxiation turned a flawed, desperate man into a Christ figure who bore the weight of the world's failings and, in doing so, cleared a path to fix them. In the feverish weeks since Charlie Kirk's assassination, the MAGA right is undergoing its own religious ferment, animated by a new martyr. Just as the left used Floyd's death to justify and hasten all manner of political ends, the right is invoking Kirk's name to advance illiberal aims and silence opponents. In death, Kirk has become a cudgel. With Floyd's death, this is these are a list of parallels. So as with Floyd's death, Kirk's has prompted a campaign to influence school children. Last week, the superintendent of an Oklahoma public school announced a plan to establish Turning Point USA chapters in every high school in the state. This is reminiscent of the curriculum associated with the New York Times 1619 project, which many public school systems adopted after Floyd's death, despite its apparent ideological bias and blatant inaccuracies. Now that's interesting because 1619, this is on the horseshoe thing, on the left is what 1776 is to the right. 1776 is a symbol. And this is, of course, the founding of America, founding principles, patriotism, January 6th, taking back the country, MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's about going back pre-feminism, pre-civil rights. It's this utopian past, idealized past, which is compared to this progressive future. So these are the opposites. This is the tug of war, 1619 versus 1776. So the 1619 project being associated with Floyd and the 1776 ethos with this patriotism, Christian nationalism, it fits this whole pattern. And I bring this up because when you look at how the script plays out, Obama is to 1619 what Trump is to 1776. These two individuals seem to be polarized in this way. And we'll get more into it, but these numbers do play a key role in communicating this story. So it goes on to say, this is the Atlantic. 5 years ago, a controversial man transformed overnight into a one-dimensional saint, marshaled in a culture war that precludes measured thought. And once again, Americans are being asked to genuflect before an idol. In becoming a martyr, Kirk has become reduced to slogans, half-truths that obscure the tragedy of his death. So there we go. The Atlantic is talking about the other martyr. Okay, so Jason Aldean did a performance, and during the performance, they had a big memorial tribute to Charlie Kirk. This is highly significant because Jason Aldean is the one who was playing country music at the Harvest Festival, the Vegas event, 10/1/2017. And of course, we all know what that event was, but he was the musician who was performing it. In fact, the gunfire sounded like it came through the same speakers. But Jason Aldean performing a tribute to Charlie Kirk is highly significant because of where he is in the culture war as a PSYOP operative, because obviously he is one. It's not like they PSYOPed Vegas and the band didn't know. He was obviously part of it. So he made news after the BLM riots because he did the song called Try That in a Small Town. And Try That in a Small Town had footage of BLM rioters, and it showed a courthouse which had several infamous lynchings. So Try That in a Small Town implied try that here and you'll get the rope. So he's attached to this controversy, and then he comes out with Candace Owens, and it turns out Candace Owens, who started White Lives Matter originally when she was hanging out with Ye before his spiral, which is all contrived, but Candace Owens is actually close friends with Jason Aldean, and so she rushed to his defense, and she said, of course he didn't mean anything by that song. He's not going to lynch me. You can find that episode. So she's a gaslighter, like Tucker Carlson, gaslighter, major gaslighters, world class. So they just completely paint over it. Like, no, we didn't know that courthouse was the site of lynchings. And Try That in a Small Town obviously didn't mean BLM, even though we had BLM in our video. So that's Jason Aldean. So now Jason Aldean having a memorial to Charlie Kirk, it's all propaganda. And you can see who it's targeting. Jack Posobiec, I referenced him earlier. He started Pizzagate. He was the one who, speaking at the Charlie Kirk event, said that the sacrifice of Charlie Kirk, because if you didn't know, He voluntarily took that bullet. And then, of course, miracle, of course, he stopped the bullet with his own neck. And had he not pulled off the miracle of stopping the bullet with his Man of Steel neck, who knows how many people it would have killed. The bullet had no intention of stopping. That's what we're supposed to believe. But Jack Posobiec was the one who said that the sacrifice of Charlie Kirk is the turning point after which we save Western civilization. That's their big thing with turning point. Like, this is a sacrifice. This is a historically important event. And he said 100 years from now, they're going to see this as the turning point. Anyway, Jack Posobiec retweeted a tweet from 2012, the same year as the music video, which has me thinking, this Charlie Kirk psyop and Erica's involvement in it. She must have known she was going to be involved in this for the last 13 years. But he retweeted a Charlie Kirk tweet from October 29th, 2012. He said, "Hope everyone is okay during this storm." Now, this is significant because storming the Capitol, the storm is coming, QAnon, Donald Trump. This is the calm before the storm. The storm has been attached to this idea of a right-wing uprising for some time. This has been a reoccurring theme. I hope everyone is okay during the storm. So the fact that Posobiec retweeted this Charlie Kirk tweet makes it notable because of what he is. He's a propaganda vector. And also, October 29th, storm. Seems like some foreshadowing, especially in light of all these storm references we've been talking about. 777 says, "Is it 33 days between CK hoax and the birthday?" Yeah. Ask Perplexity or ask ChatGPT, how many days between 10/14 and 9/11? Matthew Nixon says, now many big tubers are starting to recognize the lack of blood. See, this is the thing. We need to be the ones to push this. We need to push back against the bloody guardrail and those who stand behind it and defend it. If your starting point is he was killed, that he's not in on it. Someone had said, and I know where she was coming from. She was, you could tell by their emojis, crosses and prayer hands. They're like, Charlie Kirk was living in a Truman Show. So in other words, Erica Kirk, because this is in the comment section of the video for Emerson Drive, where it implicates her. She's part of it somehow. So they're like, okay, Charlie was then somehow in a Truman Show. Like, Charlie Kirk was a victim of Erica. That she got this nice guy, and the plot was to take over. That's kind of their narrative. And she's like, yeah, I think that Charlie Kirk was living in a Truman Show. My prayers go out to him. And I'm like, no. Charlie Kirk was not in a Truman Show. Charlie Kirk worked for Christoph. He works for the show itself. You are in the Truman Show. If you think Charlie Kirk really died for you, or died for your freedom or something, if you think he died, you're in the Truman Show. So there's a new show coming out a new season of Nashville 911. And I saw the trailer. It's about Fire Department 113. And we talked about the number 113, fiery immolations, One World Trade Tower, and what this could all imply. 113 is actually Godzilla's birthday. And Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuke. So just to be clear, that's what he represents. A Hunt for Red October, the missing submarine, the nuclear submarine theme is what's standing out here. And I think this is actually a significant thing right now, because in that Hulu series that has been accurate thus far, episode 3 ends ominously with this nuclear submarine owned by China or North Korea. So this new show's coming out. It premieres on the 9th. And it's called Nashville 911. So you got the numerology there, 911, Department 113, 109. And the episodes coming up, you got the titles, Hell and High Water, Forces of Nature. These are the first 3 episodes. October 9th, 16th, and 23rd. So I'm just noting this in context. Nashville 113 refers to Fire Station 113 in the 911 Nashville show. Streaming on Hulu, like Tempest, October 9th. It features Team 113 led by Captain Don Hart as they respond to emergencies in Music City. And they focus on a tornado hitting a country music festival. A tornado hitting a country music festival. Interesting. Just kind of reminds me of Vegas. And speaking of, the chief of police that presided over the Vegas PSYOP is the same chief of police that was in Maui with the fire event, the Maui fires. What's happening? Appreciate the support. He says, we got him good with this Charlie Kirk PSYOP, and it's helping us refine and deepen our interpretation of the world stage. We are on top of and ahead of the narrative's great work. Yes, I concur. Appreciate the comment. And this is a great opportunity. This is a perfect example for us to explain every facet of the PSYOPs that we talk about. The actual fakery, the narrative structures that go into the conspiracy realm, the mainstream, predictive and concurrent programming. I mean, all around. And then the fact that we have Erica Kirk directly participating in the creation of predictive content in that music video, and then commenting about Tyler and the shooting and the blast on that day. It's a great example, and it's irrefutable. Like, to me, this is damning. That's why I'm saying now is the time to get over that bloody guardrail and get off world stage, because this is a paradigm shift. This is objectively true. We aren't wrong about this. And if you're still clinging to the bloody guardrail, you're lagging. Your operating system needs to be updated. And we have a list. Again, I'm not going to list them right now, but I am going to read the names. We have a list of content creators who swim in these waters, but still get it wrong all the time, who still think Charlie's dead. And we're going to name names, name and shame, but we're also going to promote those who figured out that it's not as real as they'd like you to think. And out of this conversation, the next step is getting beyond just noticing the extent of fakery, but now understanding what is the cumulative effect of fake events, history bending. Once you grasp history bending in context, the mystery of predictive programming is solved. And look how it mystifies and stumps people as it is. So you're on the inside if you've already figured it out. And we weren't meant to. You realize that the off-world stage perspective that we employ here is not platformed, not anywhere else. Rilo05 says the main character was named Daniel Torrance. Oh, in The Shining. The Shining was released on 11/7/80. Trump was 36 years old. 36 years later, he wins the presidency. You know, Donald Trump is one of the most meta-scripted characters on the world stage. And this is a perfect way to explain how Charlie Kirk existed as a construct. There's scripts, there's foreshadowing Donald Trump before he was Donald Trump on the world stage. The earliest example is Trackdown, 1958. Well, 58 years later, he becomes president. But it wasn't until 7 years after that that Trump was arrested, which happens in the 1958 one. But if you go through Trump's career, you'll find the number 58 is a consistent number, with the number of stories in one of his buildings, number of years. I got to go through the list, but I have it. But 58 is like something that seems to, for some reason, saturate his entire story. Now, I don't know the meaning of that particular number, but it's a consistent facet. It even ties in to Biff Tannen, and Trump is Biff Tannen. Again, another example of where Trump has been introduced to us through fictional characters for a long time. Not by accident. This isn't us making connections. The writer of Back to the Future said Biff Tannen is Donald Trump. Dennis Hopper, who interestingly died on JFK's birthday, he plays King Koopa, who's based on Trump, and who actually vaporizes the Twin Towers, called Koopa Towers. But this idea of media foreshadowing characters, or people who play roles that have been foreshadowed by media, psyop characters, this is actually inherent in this script. So Charlie Kirk is basically a glorified crisis actor. Much higher believability than someone like David Hogg. He had a deeper presence, but it's the same thing. He's basically a David Hogg. They create these characters, they plant them in our reality, and their entire life, start to finish, in public, is like a reality TV show. It's totally scripted. Not a coincidence, I don't think, that Donald Trump is a reality TV show star. It's like it never ended. We're in season probably 35 of The Apprentice. Andre says, Tim, you mentioned The Village often. It's on FX right now. Oh, really? You know what? They're so greedy. I think they're cashing in because I think Netflix is now promoting Snake Eyes. But it's safe to talk about Snake Eyes. If you're a truther and you're mainstream, like alternative media, you can talk about Snake Eyes as long as you say, whoa, my mind is blown, bro. As long as you act like Joe Rogan, you hit your head and like mind blown, you act confused, or we live in a matrix. Like, they always sound like they're hitting bongs and just speculating about these things like it's super deep and it just sounds kind of trite. But you can only talk about these things if your conclusion is there is no real answer to it. That's why they can't talk about Tempest. That's why they probably won't talk about Heads of State, because the real-time alignment gives away the game. And nobody was drawing attention to that systematically until we started in the summer of 2022. Erica Creech says, general public is dupable, very open American people. All TV makes me ill, so degraded, not to mention the propaganda. This is why I like live streams. Well, everything is contained in their massive echo chamber. It's a closed informational system. It's a self-reinforcing echo chamber. And here, at least, you get some viewpoints that don't originate on the world stage. And this is about viewpoints. That's what worldview warfare is. It's about your point of view, controlling your perspective. If they give you the right perspective, then everything that you take in will conform to that frame. That's why I say mainstreamers or MSM Plus, Woketown, Trutherville. The people who dwell in these boxes have predictable opinions because their point of view is understood. ChatGPT's opinions about any major event is predictable. Well, people are no less predictable. It's their programming. And I'm pretty sure this is because of what we have done in terms of, we took the word guardrail in 2020 and started describing conspiracy theories as guardrails, so that if you go down a certain line of inquiry, you're only going to go so far, and then you're going to find some narrative that steers you back in. So we talked about guardrails for some time as ways of controlling thought. Well, now, and this has been like last year and a half, a lot of the conversation about AI has to do with, quote, guardrails. And before I use that term for our purposes, if you searched guardrails, you would only find advertisements for construction of literal guardrails. But now it's all about putting guardrails in the AI to stop people from thinking certain thoughts, from getting certain answers. Anime says Trump is Biff Tannen, King Koopa, and the Homelander. So he's Biff Tannen, admittedly, King Koopa, Den Hopper, interesting death date, and as Homelander, season 4, episode 8, and the episodes leading up to it were all about the attempt to assassinate Homelander, who's based on Trump. Assassination Run 4-8. And they actually changed the title of it because the episode's timing coincided with the Butler, Pennsylvania event. And I'm watching Gen V right now. I'm on season 1. Gen V is a spin-off, but it's in the same fictional universe as The Boys. And season 2, episode 4, and I'm not there yet, but this is why I'm watching it. Season 2, episode 4, they levitate a goat and then blow it up. A big bloody mess. If you watch the series, The Boys or Gen V, there are plenty of scenes where it's just gore raining down on the characters. It's like a reoccurring theme. And in this one, the goat gets blown up. But the goat's name was Elon Musk. So I'm like, wait a minute, Elon Musk levitating and blowing up goat, the sacrificial goat. I thought, well, maybe Musk is going to go to space. And unlike Kate Perry, he's not going to come back down. Not in one piece. Just a prediction. And my basis for making such a prediction is that if the previous series already had PSYOP relevant content delivered at the same time, so close that they had to modify it, then why wouldn't I think that blowing up Elon Musk on season 2, episode 4, the 42 thing, why wouldn't I think that this infers something about Musk possibly literally blowing up after levitating, meaning going to space? By the way, the number stuff, I was thinking about Netflix, because we live on planet Netflix. There's a series called 100, and I could go into a lot of directions with the number 100 as it relates to the next foreshadowed 9/11 event. But the series 100, season 1, episode 13, says 113, the space station falls. In that episode, in a bunker, you see the painting of the Tower of Babylon. And the ISS combines all the nations. We have one language going from earth to the heaven. I think in many ways, the ISS represents this Tower of Babel construct, this one world mission. And even walking on the moon is like man's incursion into the heavenly realms. But the number 113 has been consistently associated, since we're getting into this number, with this destruction of the Tower of Babel. And I think that's why it keeps pointing at the Space Needle, because 113 is clearly associated with the One World Trade Tower, again, Tower of Babel stuff, which there's a lot more to it, even in the architecture, but it opened on 113. But I don't think that the next major event would take place at ground zero for 9/11 all over again. So the other historic monument, the icon that would be replacing that as a symbol of this tower, would logically be the Space Needle. And this was foreshadowed in Final Destination just last May. So Seattle, Space Needle, West Coast, all these things are still being foreshadowed. Just ahead, I'm just thinking, we talked about the number 113, and I just want to iterate that in 2019, on November the 3rd, based on what we're looking at here, we were like, hey, it looks like Seattle's going to get it. Ground zero Seattle, November the 3rd. So we had a live stream, and a couple others did as well, and we're watching Seattle live, thinking they're going to 9/11 Seattle. Well, instead, some Space Needle in Turkey blew up. Big fire. You can see this on the news. November 3rd, 2019. So while we're staring at the Space Needle, a different Space Needle observatory thing burns. And I remember, actually, it was Copacetic. He emailed me, and he said, maybe it's 3/11. Maybe Seattle's going to be ground zero on 3/11. And I ran out of patience for it. So I'm like, yeah, we'll see. But then as we got closer to 3/11/2020, I was thinking, okay, wait a minute. Maybe we were wrong. So on that Sunday, I had a live stream that said World War III starts on Wednesday. And so on 3/11, of course, Seattle was declared ground zero for the pandemic. And some of the predictive content that led us to this conclusion, things like Netflix's show Colony, about this alien invasion that shuts down the world, they take over. You never see the aliens, just like we never actually saw the thing that shut us down. It was invisible. The aliens were invisible. But these aliens who remained behind the scenes take over. And I was on season 3, episode 11, where they were talking about this operation to seize back control, to rebuild. They called it Operation Phoenix. And one of the lines from season 3, episode 11 of Colony is, Seattle is ground zero for the reboot of civilization. So we were looking at 3/11, Seattle, ground zero, reboot of civilization. What happened? 3/11, ground zero, pandemic, great reset. Going through your comments. Anime Gematria says, do you think they made reality TV shows to make their fake scripted mainstream news events even seem real? Yeah, I think that reality TV was intended to blur the lines between real and fake even further. I think it was to degrade our ability to tell the difference and lower the standards. I mean, really, reality TV is very lowbrow, generally trashy content. And I think it's certainly by design, because a psyop is essentially a reality TV event. You assume it's real. And, I had this conversation with Alex Stein. I saw, side note, because Alex Stein, he kind of replaced Steven Crowder. Like, Steven Crowder was the annoying, extended adolescence, emotionally arrested right-winger trolling the left on the campuses. And then he kind of grew up, he had a kid. And so they replaced Steven Crowder with Alex Stein. And so I came across Alex Stein when I was working at Dark Matter, because they hired him to be a host for a little while because he had Conspiracy Castle. And he was telling myself and the producer about how they worked together. He and the producer worked for Clark Gable's grandson. Clark Gable's, the king of Hollywood at the time. So yeah, Clark Gable's grandson had a reality TV show. It was called Cheaters. And if you've seen it, Cheaters is where they catch couples cheating on TV, and it's like live. It's like reality TV. And what he had told us was, I mean, they have non-disclosure agreements, but Stein told us that every single one of those scenes was staged, that Cheaters was all fake, but that they signed non-disclosure agreements. So I thought that's kind of interesting that he gets his start in reality TV, and now he's in this conspiracy community, planted, I would say. And then after that, he goes to the Blaze. And next thing you know, he's at Uvalde crisis acting. I tweeted him. I sent him a DM. I said, hey, Alex, fake dead kids' lives don't matter. And he's over there in Uvalde crying to the city council about how the police didn't stop the kids from dying. And he blocked me. He blocked me for saying fake dead kids' lives don't matter. I didn't know they did. Apparently they do to him. They make him cry. But I'm just saying, there's an interesting connection between reality TV to actually performing in psyops. And if you look at the access he's had, rubbing shoulders with the president even, I mean, okay, there's something there to this. And then you look at Erica Kirk, who also had a background in reality TV. So these are people who know that the public is being lied to, and they also know that they're all standing behind a non-disclosure agreement, which is like a Masonic blood oath. It's basically, yeah, we are all a bunch of liars, but we're well paid, and we're not going to tell because there are ramifications and repercussions. So I'm just pointing it out that in regards to your reality TV show thing, yeah, there's something to reality TV. And it could be a way to even onboard a lot of people to participate in psyops later. Okay, so now there's something else here. Oh yeah, Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder is cosplaying as someone who's actually telling dangerous, threatening truths, challenging the system. Yeah, Steven Crowder is cosplaying as Brave, and he's wearing a bulletproof vest, and he does his tour. It's kind of like Charlie Kirk, Prove Me Wrong. Steven Crowder does Change My Mind. So he's going out to these college campuses wearing a bulletproof vest. It's like nobody wants to shoot Steven Crowder. I can understand Alex Stein, but not because of anything he says, just because of how annoying he is. But nobody wants to shoot Steven Crowder. And Crowder has to be, again, an insider. You don't move in these circles, especially anybody associated with January 6th is controlled op. Owen Schroyer was supposedly jailed. Did he share? I mean, like the QAnon shaman, these guys went to jail? No, that's all fake. Ribo Nation says everyone on TV is an actor. Yeah, my only qualifier to this is that anybody who's forced onto our collective psyche, anybody who's just thrust out there that you can't ignore, like you try to ignore, like Taylor Swift, you can't ignore these characters if they want you to pay attention to them. And if anybody is promoted, if anything goes viral, as a good rule of thumb, they're in on the act. How do NDAs work in court cases, says Sunworks? Well, the thing about NDAs is that they do not cover illegal activity. So let's say you sign an NDA and you participate in a fake school shooting thing. Okay, no crimes were committed. You're just an actor doing a simulation for propaganda purposes. The ethics are questionable. Maybe you can justify it. Maybe you think you're doing a good thing and saving lives, but you're not breaking any laws. Now, if they actually killed people in psyops, like some people think, that would invalidate every NDA. So what's stopping all these crisis actors, some of them children signing waivers with their parents, what's stopping these people from blowing the whistle on what we would consider to be murder, premeditated mass murder? And you think an NDA is going to stop anybody with a conscience from talking about it? Like, I signed an NDA. I got a minimum wage gig yesterday. I just pretended to cry, and I ran out of a classroom with my hands on my head. Yeah, they murdered 30 kids, but I can't talk about it because I signed this piece of paper. Like, no, NDAs don't explain that whatsoever. The bloody guardrail explains it. They're not really killing people. Ryler05, good one. Sam Hyde, funny guy, comedian, but he outed him as an intelligent asset. He said, I am Charlie Kirk. You are Charlie Kirk. And your sister's the girl that got killed on the subway. Like, no, that's not my sister. And I'm not Charlie Kirk. I thought that was kind of see, thing is, when he said this, Alex Jones shared it. And he said, this is like the best thing ever. Everyone should watch this video where it's just, I am Charlie Kirk. Then I saw some female influencer, and she says, I'm Charlie Kirk. And I'm like, no, aren't you Irna Zaruski, the girl on the subway? And I'm Charlie Kirk. Like, how can you be Charlie Kirk? Personally, I told her, I identify as Corey Comprator, the fireman who was killed in Butler. You know, since we're all identifying as fake dead people. But yeah, Sam Hyde, poor judgment. Maybe he doesn't know the difference. There's no excuse. I don't think there's any excuse at this point. If Sam Hyde believes that Charlie Kirk is dead, he's stuck in Trutherville. Not that I care. I don't hold these people to higher standards. I just think we need to know, who we can listen to, who's credible and who's not when it comes to world stage events, and clearly he is not. Another comedian also had a take that I found to be kind of analogous to this, and that was Owen Benjamin. He said that he thinks it came out, that the whole event, he said, the event happened as the way the mainstream media reported it. And he also said that social media is dangerous and we need digital IDs. So Owen Benjamin not only believes that Charlie Kirk is dead, but he believes that because of it, we need to regulate social media because the shooter was radicalized on Discord. So you're telling me that the most banned comedian on earth is now behind censoring social media? Like he would be specifically censored for his content because a lot of his content goes into woke right ideology, which has actually fed all of the right-wing shooters. So when I see these comedians running with the PSYOP as though it's real to use its agendas, I'm just like, okay, 2 more of these PSYOP operative plants. Comedians are very useful for this stuff. They can say things with plausible deniability. I was just kidding. They can test things, and they can also take serious topics and make them into jokes, make them unserious, which is also part of the program here. They don't want people to take this seriously. They want some comedian to make a bug face and talk about simulations and how none of this makes sense. They want the tinfoil hat stereotype to be actualized in anybody looking in this direction. And I'm not a tinfoil hatter. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in chemtrails. All right, let's see here. Anime Gematria says, I am not Charlie Kirk. Nobody is, because that was a character. Yeah, I had this idea. It's probably going to happen. I have some predictions about Halloween costumes this year. Like, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a bunch of Wednesday Addams walking around. But I think there's going to be, I know there's going to be a Charlie Kirk. Like, I think there's going to be some squibs this Halloween. Because the anti-Charlie Kirk people are just morbid. And the fact is, we know he's not dead, so I don't care. But they think he's dead. And thinking that he's dead, they're totally ghoulish about this. So I'm expecting there to be some Charlie Kirk costumes with possible, squibs. I'm hoping that's the case, because the word squib needs to go viral. If I could make anything go viral right now, it would be auto hoaxers and squibs. The second the alternative media, anybody with a big platform, has to utter the word squib, it opens a can of worms. The second, because they legitimize the concept. They don't even want to acknowledge it. See, there's a difference between censored and unacknowledged. Alex Jones is censored. But on the world stage, censored means you're highly promoted. Nobody can avoid you. You're highly promoted because you're, quote, censored. And that just means you're censored by the mainstream. But you're not censored by the alternative media, which is an equal side, an equal part of the world stage. Alt and mainstream, it's a schism. It's not like mainstream, like alternative is small. No, Alex Jones is a big voice. So no, he's not really censored. It's all performative. But there's a difference between that kind of censorship, faux censorship, and non-acknowledgement. So the mainstream and the alternative both ignore, they do not even acknowledge the off-world stage perspective. So we're not even censored. We just don't even exist in their fictional universe. But that's fine, because now that our raft is merging, we're arriving on the world stage, now we're confronting it. And this is why we're building lists. The MSM minus is confronting MSM plus. We're listing names. We're building a database of possible shills, agents, and people, if you want to give them, plausible deniability, people who are still fooled. We'll just say people with outdated operating systems. So we've got these groups of people that we're listing, and we need to pull the plug on them. As in, if you're paying subscription fees to Tim Pool or Owen Schroyer, you need to unplug that and plug it into somebody on the off-world stage. And off-world stagers are going to be those that we also provide on the list. These are the content creators who got the Charlie Kirk thing right. IPS, fakeologists, and a lot of Twitter accounts that I can list. So anybody who got the Charlie Kirk thing right deserve your support. And your attention, as in your comments, your thinking, your research. But anybody who's still on the other side of it, no, we need to unplug. Now we're just studying them. Now it's all just opposition research. I don't want to pay for anybody's crack rocks. I don't want to pay for any red pills. I'm not going to enable any addicts. If you're a red pill addict, you have to understand that every one of those red pills is actually toxic. And beneath it all, it's actually black. It's black, then it's blue, then it's green, then it's red. Tucker got kicked off Fox to guardrail the alternative news. Absolutely. And Candace Owens, she got kicked off the Ben Shapiro's outfit. So she went from the pro-Israel And Ben Shapiro is very overt in his support for Israel. It's over the top on purpose because they want this schism to be very clear, that you have the so-called neocon, the pro-Israel, and then you have the fringe, the woke right. So Candace Owens and Tucker are on the woke right side. This is why Tucker Carlson claims he was attacked by an alien in his bed that left long scars down his back. It was an alien, well, a demon. But he said that demons, no, he said it was a demon in bed, but that his friends at the Pentagon told him that aliens are demons. So he was attacked in his bed by an alien. But the reason why they do this is that, and I said this before, aliens are angels for the atheists, for the progressives, for the new paradigm. But the traditionals still believe in angels and demons. So to the traditional religious types, the woke right in particular, but just the right in general, aliens are demons. Aliens are a government scam. Aliens are the bad guys. But to the left, aliens are the good guys. You'll notice that to the left, illegal aliens are also the good guys. And to the right, illegal aliens are the bad guys. And I noticed this with Tucker, where he's talking about extraterrestrials. They're dark, they're demonic, they're from far away. And then he's like, illegal aliens are coming from far away, from sub-Saharan Africa. And so I'm like, wait a minute here. Is he talking about extraterrestrial or terrestrials? Like, he conflates the two by design, because the xenophobia psyop is encoded into, it's baked into the right-wing infrastructure. One of them is pro-alien, extraterrestrial, and earthly, and the others are anti. But Tucker has all of these positions, if you check the boxes, as though he was given a script. And it is a script. You are going to represent the right side of the political horseshoe to the right of the neocons. And that your position is going to be that this group killed Charlie. Couldn't have. So anyway, as we can see here, these are all manufactured characters. And you're right, Tucker was a plant. Candace Owens is a plant. Ryler05 says, Quasimodo predicted all of this. Quasimodo, are you referring to, I don't know who you're talking about. I know Quasi-Luminous, but he changed his name to Satan and he disappeared. That was the blood over intent guy. If you didn't know about the blood cult, that was pretty big in the flat earth groups. That was Quasi-Luminous. Then you have Quantum of Consciousness. Is that who you're talking about? I don't know Quasimodo. So no, Tucker didn't really get kicked off. And Tucker thinks his listeners are dumb. I mean, imagine he actually went out there on a documentary and he said he was attacked by a demon in his bed and it left scars on his back. Show us your scars. If I got attacked by a chupacabra, I would show you my scars. He got attacked by a demon in his bed. And it's just me and my 4 big dogs and my wife in bed, and the demon attacked me. It's like, okay, I don't know. 4 big dogs. I'm assuming that they have claws. Maybe you rolled on top of one of them. Like why reach for, I was attacked by a demon? Oh, okay. Quasimodo from Sopranos. You know, The Sopranos season 1, episode 12. Tony Soprano is carrying a cup of orange juice, and there's an attempt on his life. And the bullet goes, I think it shoots the cup, and then it also grazes his ear. So at the end of the first season, Tony Soprano is wearing a big bandage on his ear. Kind of like the big bandage on Trump's ear. And if you remember, some of the characterization that goes into Trump was the mob boss, like a mafia don. Donald Trump is a very layered character, and Musk is too. You know, when you look at these characters, you have to look at what fictional characters lend substance to them. Like, who are they building these associations with as they're building these characters? I mean, with Musk, it's pretty easy. He's basically Willy Wonka combined with Werner von Braun. Throw in some Tony Stark and some Henry Ford, some Jack Parsons, and then shake it all up. Donald Trump is an amalgamation of Biff Tannen, I guess Senator McLaughlin from Machete, certainly King Koopa, also I think the name is Charlie Coker and A Man in Full, based on a Tom Wolfe novel that they repurposed for Netflix about Trump. But anyway, these characters permeate the closed informational system, these archetypes, these characters, and they step into these roles. I mean, it's quite remarkable. But yeah, they're all like Frankenstein creations, like a bunch of parts sewn together. Exactly, LG. He said he was attacked by a demon because he's going for Christian nationalism. And also, he went against aliens, alien invaders, for the same reason. Because they want to maintain the idea that aliens are, in fact, demons. So the left loves the demons. It all makes he even said the Democrats have made deals with the aliens, which is to say, of course, the demons. And then when it comes to the nationalism thing, you got illegal aliens and then build the wall to protect the nation from the alien invasion, the illegal alien invasion. Well, Trump is also known for what? Space Force, to protect us against aliens. And interestingly, in the 1958 episode Trackdown, End of the World, the Trump character who's run out of town, who's arrested, he convinces the people in the village they need to be protected from a cosmic threat. So it even foreshadows building the wall and Space Force. But the fact that the far right, or the right in general, is behind Space Force and the wall, and they're also on the side of the anti-vax, is all by design, because it's about having impenetrable barriers against the government, against invasion. So they against the aliens is the wall. The vax represents an invasion of their bloodstream. So the skin, they want their skin intact. And they want their Space Force to protect the Earth itself and the atmosphere against anything coming in. So it's all about borders. But then if you look at the left side, they're like open borders, beam us up aliens, and vax us, please. Our skin is porous. So one side is porous, one side is closed. And you go down the line, and you'll find that there's actually an architecture here, and it's very consistent. So their opinions are very predictable. And I'm even saying here that the fear of aliens is actually, I think, part of getting people into the state of fearing the other in such a way that it can be translated to other aliens, earthly aliens. It's always about the threat with them, and it's about quarantine. The quarantine narrative is pretty intriguing here when you get into how the left wants to quarantine against the right because they're super spreaders, because they reject the mainstream solutions. They reject salvation, which is the injectable Eucharist. So the left wants to quarantine against the right, not only because they carry viruses, because they're anti-vax, but because they carry misinformation, i.e. mind viruses. So they're in favor of the censorship of the right to protect our health. So the left wants quarantine from the right for these reasons. The right wants quarantine against the left because of not mind viruses, but because of this moral panic is what I call it, the satanic panic, against essentially the same thing. The virus is sort of a construct analogous to sin. The left doesn't believe in sin. The right wants to quarantine against those influences. So they're aiming for more of a spiritual immunity. The left doesn't believe in church or God. I mean, the godless progressive worldview is what they're standing against. So anyway, it's a perfect split. But each side sees the other side as unsaved and their own side as saved. It's mutual quarantine. And you find this dialectic is consistent throughout the entire program, like urban and suburban. The right wing's always like, get out of the cities, be afraid of the subways. They were saying, get out. And they would share videos of violence on subways. The subway scene with the girl getting killed is so frightening to the right because they've been conditioned to see this as the subway represents the underclass, a violent uprising that could occur if they should rise up. The subway is a very potent symbol. That's why it was used in Batman and in Joker, where the Joker in the subway is picked on by some rich guys, and he's a poor victim of society. The society's made him into the clown that he is. And so he gets back and he shoots the rich guys and he becomes a hero, starts a revolution. So that's like revolutionary Marxism, the underclass, the subway. And then in Batman, it starts off in a subway and he's beating up the clowns. So Batman is kind of coded for the right and a fascist uprising or fascist takeover, whereas Joker is coded for the left and a left-wing uprising, which is why it makes sense that the Joker movie ends 2019 with the Jokers, all these people wearing the Joker mask, the masked mobs rising up. And then what happened the following summer? But this, again, this Batman thing, the movies, they all track with the world stage consistently. And it's just interesting to see how the symbolism works because the subway was the scene of Daniel Penny strangling Jordan Neely. And there's a lot we could go into with that particular event. But Daniel Penny was seen as a vigilante to the right because, of course, the right wing sees the subway as threatening, represents the poor communist uprising. And they saw him as a hero. That's why Kid Rock donated a bunch of money, MTG. They made Daniel Penny into a hero. So he's a hero to the right, villain to the left. Then this ties in to Luigi Mangione, who shoots a CEO. The left praises that. They see him as a hero, as a vigilante for their side in the class war. And the right sees him as a murderer. And so it's not a coincidence that Luigi Mangione goes into jail as Daniel Penny's released. They're creating outrage on the left. And they're showing this juxtaposition of one side's vigilante is the other side's villain. But that took place in the subway. So we're talking about the symbol of the subways in these scenarios where the right was saying for months and months leading up to the Jordan Neely thing, stay out of the subways, get out of the cities. Well, it turns out there's a Jordan Peele movie called Get Out. And so I thought there's got to be a connection here because get out has been a refrain among the right, get out of the cities, like quarantine against the left. Well, it turns out, interestingly enough, the movie Get Out has a Daniel Penny-like character who strangles a black character, and a lacrosse player like Daniel Penny is a lacrosse player. That's why I would argue, and I think Synchromorpheus really called this one out, that the Jordan Neely subway psyop was directed by Peele. There's every indication that he is the scripter involved in that particular psyop event. Okay, we're almost up here, almost at our 3-hour mark. I am going to continue to put these into the podcast feeds. And I am going to resume the 24-hour stream so it won't repeat anymore. So I appreciate all of your constructive feedback. I do take that into account and I do implement the changes that you suggest. Trading cards, I know these have been delayed. It's been a few weeks. I hit a big bump, but those are still in production. Everything is still going according to plan. The book's doing great. By the way, I want to say thanks to all of you who ordered the book. The book is called Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar. Released on 9/12, just in time for the CK PSYOP, 311 pages. It represents a collection of the thinking that has emerged out of our think tank, our thought process when it comes to how we consume media, the PSYOP entertainment complex, the metascript, the world stage, all this content that we've produced here out of this think tank had to be consolidated in case like squibbed. You know, we want to have all the ideas on page. I sleep better now knowing the book's out there. It's like a logic bomb. Like it's going to go off at some point, with or without me, with or without us. These ideas are taking root. The fact that we see people even entertaining the idea that Kirk's not dead, you realize that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago at the scale that it's at now. And now that the Snake Eyes stuff has been so highlighted, it gives us an opportunity to directly interface with the people confronting this stuff. And answering their questions. I've been going through that Erica Kirk video where anytime I see somebody say, we're in the Matrix, how does this work? I send them links to my blog. I'm like, yeah, you're just looking at long-term scripted history bending. This event was written decades ago. It was performed on the news, but it's a simulation, and this is how we know. And I'm using this as an opportunity to push people over the edge. There's a lot of people who are like 90% of the way to the off-world stage. They've already gone over the bloody guardrail, but now they're confronting the program itself. And that's the meta script. When you can see the program, then you can reach what I consider to be deprogrammed. You're not deprogrammed, you're not off world stage until you can see the world stage and the program that is like when you go to a theater, you get a program. The program is the engineered history that we're living through, that they make in front of us, that we co-create by our blind acceptance of it. Dark Ghost Wind says, do you know about the movie Him, which is produced by Jordan Peele's group Monkey Paw? There's another reason to watch it. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see it. There's this horrific football injury, Tyreek Hill, and it caught my attention because Tyreek Hill was roughly treated by the police at a stop on the way to a game days after Rebel Ridge, which opens up with a black protagonist beaten up by the cops and robbed, and the cops are all like Klansmen, and he has to take revenge. And when people saw Tyreek Hill's treatment, it was compared to the Netflix release that just came out. Like, again, standard approach here. Popular show, let me watch it, Rebel Ridge, and let me see what happens. And there you go, on the world stage, Tyreek Hill. Well, Tyreek Hill just had his leg destroyed the other night. And it got me thinking about the movie Him for a few reasons. So I need to watch the movie because I know it has to do with football but the behind the scenes stuff. Because remember Damar Hamlin and all that weirdness with the 33s and the kneeling? Well, after Tyreek Hill was injured, it was reported that both teams kneeled and prayed for his knee, I guess. But there's some deeper significance to the kneeling as it pertains to football. If you go back to 2016, Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem. So Kaepernick is associated with the 1619 thing. Trump is the reason he got fired. Trump, 1776. The kneeling was then picked up by Derek Chauvin, who thought it would be a neat idea. And then BLM picked it up. So the kneeling always had some significance to this particular psyop. And for Colin Kaepernick to be the quarterback during Super Bowl 47 adds a little more to this, because that was the Super Bowl where it went dark for 33 minutes. And Super Bowl 47, I said at the time, leading up to this, that this is going to shadow the 47th presidency right now. So I always saw this presidency, 47, this term, as relating to this blackout. And again, blackout, 42, BLM, it's all encoded into this. So I'm looking forward to the next plot twists on the world stage, and 2 dates to look forward to. 10/9, Nashville 911. 10/14, Charlie Kirk's Day, but also the left is going to celebrate it as George Floyd's Day. Engineered conflict. What's up, Frank Castle? King Ravana says, can't wait for my cards. The book is great. Yeah, I can't wait to get them back out. It was on a good run, but I'm not blaming Amazon. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. However, there were some irregularities when I placed my order for the books. That I ordered them on a Friday. They didn't process my order till Tuesday after they processed the order for my ads, which they've never done it like this before. And it just seemed kind of strange because it was just enough to block the book order and create a big mess. So no big deal. We'll have it fixed here soon. Ryla05 says title injury looked AI to me. There's some reasons why I think that's worth looking at, but I don't know the mechanism of fakery if fakeable. So we have to ask the question, is it fakeable? Well, everything is kayfabeable to an extent. It is, but I don't know. I'm just saying I'm looking into it. Big Enchilada says Tom Petty was at the 42nd Super Bowl stadium in Phoenix. Seven says take one knee for Charlie Kirk and the other for George Floyd. You know what's funny is when Floyd died, the right mocked his death. They did the George Floyd challenge. And then Charlie Kirk dies, and anybody mocking it gets insta-canceled. Like, they're all canceled. Like, oh, we can censor you if you talk about Charlie Kirk bad. In fact, there's a story, it might be fake, might be real. Some teenager was mad at these girls for mocking Charlie Kirk's death, and he ran them over and killed them. So there is a story about somebody killing in the name of Charlie Kirk, and he killed 2 girls. It could be real. And this is why, even though I say that this could be a benevolent dictatorship, they're using mind war because we're in need of this structure, the media still does gin up a lot of chaos. I mean, it's undeniable. There are real effects. So that wouldn't shock me if it was real, but it could be fake. I mean, I don't know yet. But this Floyd Kirk thing, it's so engineered, the birth date. So that's why I'm looking at that date in particular. 777 says the so-called leftists love their soulless talk show host named Jimmy. Yeah, I just see these characters as 2 minutes of hate. You know, sometimes they're funny or their writers are funny, but I think their job is to basically communicate what is funny, what's mockable, what's to be taken seriously. But it's always highlighting like 2 minutes of hate, like from 1984. But I remember I was watching an episode, it was Bill Maher, and he was heckled by somebody in the audience. And the person he heckled had a MAGA hat. And he said, he said, security, it's got a MAGA hat, you might want to search for guns. And everybody laughed. The next day was a day that Nick Crusius shot up the Walmart in El Paso. And they said it was because of Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric. Again, Patrick Crusius, you may remember that was the same weekend as the Ned Peppers in Ohio, another mass shooting where all the shoes were in the street. And then you had this garlic festival in California, another shooting. And weirdly enough, the shooter in Ohio, the shooter at the garlic festival, and the El Paso shooter all look the same, if you haven't compared those 3. Thanks for posting the link, Copaesthetic. There's a link in the chat if you want to pick up Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed. It's only available in print. It has to be in print. I have to emphasize, I don't want to make it digital because this coming blackout that is being foreshadowed, leave the world behind, everything that's foreshadowing it, this is quite a lot. But the bottom line of it is I don't think that they're going to black out the infrastructure to where we're able to snap out of our media trances and start making friends and touching grass and talking to each other. I don't think they can let us go. That would be cutting our leash. I think the blackout refers to the internet equivalent of the COVID-19 lockdowns, Disease X. And I called it, when Musk bought Twitter and called it X, I correlated this with the WHO talking about Disease X being the big one that shuts us down. Well, if you really understand what the C19 was about, it was about censorship. Not really censorship in our sense, but it was about controlling narratives, controlling the flow of, quote, mind viruses, controlling ideas, information control, worldview warfare. But they scaled it up, and this was a global event that synchronized everybody. So when the WHO was talking about the next big one, Disease X, this hypothetical, it's a placeholder name, I said, no, this is referring to mind viruses. The next lockdown isn't going to be for a physical virus that you can a bowl of underheated bat soup. But no, this is going to be a mind virus that is going to be used as the justification for tamping down on free speech. And if you got the most banned comedian on earth suggesting that we need to have an ID to go on social media, then you can kind of see where this is going. He's telling his subscribers, hey, social media is great, but you got to have a license. Can't have free speech. It's dangerous. People like me might be heard. Like, I mean, how counter is that to his own interests for him to suggest censorship when he is a banned comedian? I mean, it's insane. And again, he's performatively banned. It's a role he's playing. I mean, prove me wrong, change my mind. I am pretty certain that I'm right about this, though. They're too lockstep in their opinions. These influencers who have the same opinions at the same time are taking orders. Like, they're all the alt-right MAGA band types on the same day are like, yeah, the age of consent's too high. Or, yeah, I don't like people from this place. Like, they're always uniform in their opinions. So these aren't real opinions. They're not really investigating. They are essentially pre-masticating propaganda to spit into the mouths like mama bird, into the baby birds' mouths, just basically stuffing it into the beaks of their subscribers who are just passively consuming what they're fed. That is what they are. They're propagandists. Remerick says, John Bonet, the killer list, has popped up on my Roku channel. Yeah, everyone's saying that Erica Kirk is John Bonet Ramsey. I don't know. I thought Kate Perry was John Bonet Ramsey. I was already attached to that one. Exactly, Dark Ghost. When Discord is a place for super spreaders. Now, if you think about super spreaders and contact tracing, you can relate this back to post 9/11 radical mosques. So the radical Discord is the new radical mosque where radical verses are inspiring terrorists. So they trace their paths and how they got radicalized to this. So it's always contact tracing the mind viruses that made them terrorists and where they caught it from. Who was the mind virus super spreader? You see some of my images of the penguin with the burning head. That's a reference to Hot Skulls, which is a series, I think it was made in Turkey, and it's about a world that's quarantined because of mind viruses. And the government mandates earplugs because if somebody has the mind viruses, you can catch them. So you're forced to wear earplugs. So it's obviously drawing a connection to the mask, which I said is a symbol of censorship. But the earplug thing is pretty funny because those who don't wear the earplugs, they walk into a store and they're talking and everybody runs because they don't want to catch the mind viruses. And the people who are, and the main character is listening to what these people are saying. He takes off his earplugs. He records it and he listens to it all night. And he's being spied on by the government because they can't figure out how is this guy able to take in all this jabbering is what they called it, which I think is a reference to the jabs. But how can he take in all this content and not go crazy? Because people were going crazy from it. He didn't lose his mind. But able to detect people who carry mind viruses with these like infrared, like their skulls are literally hot, like feverishly hot, like on fire. So the hot skull means that the mind is full of this dangerous misinformation, full of mind viruses, you could say. And if you also follow the logic here, the idea of the asymptomatic super spreader meant that the healthy person is the greatest threat because they can spread it to the immune system compromised. Similarly, they're going to make the argument, they already have, that the healthy mind virus super spreaders are the threats, the content creators, influencers like influencers, mind flu. We are the threat because we are not getting sick from the mind viruses. We're hot skulls. And yet, who are we a danger to? Society, because the mentally ill, those with weak mental immune systems, can catch our mind viruses and then they go do bad things. So they've made this, they've trained us, they've conditioned us, they've made this the narrative that it is the healthy super spreaders of physical and mind viruses who need to be censored, who need to be locked down, because society is threatened by those with compromised immune systems, physical and mental. But again, the public has been trained to consume media uncritically when it comes to authoritative sources, especially with these big events. They have been given maids by the government, mind aids. All right, this has been great. I want to say thanks to all those who have supported the channel. Also, the comments, the research, it's really top notch. I recommend going to my blog if you haven't and just catch up on this Erica Kirk thing. The long and short of it is Heads of State came out this year, and it's got Vice President Elizabeth Kirk. So that's a connection, because everybody around that circle were saying Erica Kirk should be vice president under J.D. Vance in 2028. So Vice President Erica Kirk has already been floated. VP Kirk. Now there's a movie out with a female vice president named Kirk. It's like, okay, that's a connection. But the connection goes deeper, because the actress who plays Vice President Kirk is the same actress who was wearing the blonde wig next to Charlie Kirkland, Snake Eyes, when he gets assassinated. And she is inextricably tied into the conspiracy to kill him. Now, I thought the movie was terrible. I admit I couldn't finish it, so I don't know the full story. But the same actress who plays Vice President Kirk in a present time movie is in Snake Eyes next to Charlie Kirkland when he dies. And the implications of Erica Kirk's involvement with the assassination, as with Tempest, this widow story, completely comports with this. So anyway, that is another, I guess, problem for those who want to think that Charlie Kirk is dead. It's another hoax indicator, another problem for those who want to dismiss or minimize the significance of predictive programming, because this would constitute concurrent programming connecting to predictive programming from 27 years prior by using the same actress and then matching up the names again. Like, do you realize how improbable this is to be a sheer coincidence? This is beyond selectivity bias. This is not cherry picking. This isn't Texas sharpshooter fallacy. No, this is objective evidence. This is actually proof positive of long-term media manipulation. Yeah, LG, you're right about that. Erica Kirk's mom working for Homeland Security, her dad. Yeah, it's all. Then her background as a pageant model connected with Trump, and then Charlie Kirk's dad being an architect for Trump Tower. So everything about it says arranged marriage, scripted lives, totally fake. Charlie Kirk's alive, hanging out with George Floyd, and they're going to be drinking Coronas while the people riot in the streets over whose birthday we should be celebrating. All right, have a great evening. We'll continue this conversation in the Discord server. If you want a link to Discord, get on this letter, because when I upload this archive,